7 minutes. That's all Claire Bennett had left before losing everything. Her company, her reputation, the $80 million contract that investors were about to rip away. The billion-dollar production line sat dead. Her genius engineers stood useless. Then someone mentioned the maintenance guy. The single dad everyone ignored. The one her chief engineer had publicly humiliated an hour ago. Claire's hands shook as she made the call that would either save Orion Dynamics or destroy what little credibility she had left. But here's what nobody knew. That quiet man in the faded uniform? He was about to prove everyone wrong. If you want to see how this impossible story unfolds, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The lobby of Orion Dynamics gleamed with the kind of sterile perfection that screamed new money and old desperation. Polished marble floors reflected the nervous energy of engineers rushing past, their faces tight with the particular strain that comes from knowing today might determine whether they still have jobs tomorrow. Nathan Cole pushed through the revolving door at 7:43 a.m., his daughter's small hand tucked into his calloused palm. "Daddy, you promised you'd fix Mr. Beeps today," Emma said, clutching the broken toy robot against her chest. The thing had been her favorite since her mother died 3 years ago. One arm hung at an odd angle, the result of an unfortunate encounter with the kitchen floor 2 days prior. "I will, sweetheart. Promise." Nathan adjusted the worn tool bag on his shoulder. The vinyl had cracked along one edge, held together with electrical tape that had itself started to fray. "But first, Daddy's got to check on some machines." The security guard barely glanced at Nathan's temporary maintenance badge. Why would he? Nathan looked like every other contractor who cycled through the building. Forgettable, insignificant, just another guy trying to make rent. What the security guard didn't know, what nobody in that gleaming lobby knew, was that Nathan Cole had once been the youngest senior systems engineer in Orion Dynamics history. That the patents hanging in Claire Bennett's corner office? 3 of them had his name buried in the fine print, back when he'd been Marcus Cole's protege, back before the car accident that killed his wife and shattered the life he'd carefully built. But that was a different Nathan, a different life. This Nathan wore a faded navy uniform with someone else's name stitched above the pocket, Rodriguez, because the staffing agency had run out of his size. This Nathan worked 13-hour shifts, fixing industrial air conditioning units and unclogging executive bathrooms. This Nathan was invisible. And invisible meant safe. Invisible meant stable. Invisible meant Emma got to eat 3 meals a day and sleep in the same apartment for more than 6 months at a time. "Can I have the iPad?" Emma asked as they rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. "You know the rules. Homework first, then screens." "But I finished my homework." "Emma." "Fine." She pulled out a crumpled math worksheet from her backpack, the edges already decorated with sketches of robots and rocket ships. The kid couldn't sit still without drawing something. She'd gotten that from her mother. The elevator dinged. 3rd floor. Engineering. Nathan's chest tightened the way it always did when he stepped onto this floor. The smell hit him first. That distinctive mixture of machine oil, solder flux, and the particular ozone tang of high-voltage equipment running at capacity. It triggered memories he'd spent 3 years trying to bury. Late nights solving impossible problems. Marcus Cole's booming laugh. The pure rush of watching a system he'd designed come to life for the first time. He shoved those thoughts down. That wasn't his world anymore. "Mr. Cole!" A young engineer named David Park waved from across the hall. "Hey, there's a weird rattle in the HVAC system near Lab 3. Can you take a look?" "Sure thing." Nathan appreciated David. The kid actually remembered his name, actually said hello instead of looking through him like he was part of the furniture. Emma settled into a chair outside Lab 2, pulling out her colored pencils. Nathan watched her for a moment, the way she hunched over her homework with fierce concentration, tongue poking out slightly between her teeth. She was so much like Sarah, it hurt. "I'll be right here if you need me, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." Nathan headed toward Lab 3, but he didn't make it far. The sound stopped him cold. It was faint, barely audible under the normal hum of the engineering floor. A tiny vibration, cycling at irregular intervals. Most people wouldn't have noticed it. Hell, most engineers wouldn't have noticed it. But Nathan wasn't most engineers. His body reacted before his brain caught up, muscle memory from 1,000 diagnostic sessions pulling him toward the source. He found himself standing outside Lab 2, staring through the reinforced glass at the massive production line inside. The crown jewel. That's what they were calling it. The automated manufacturing system that was supposed to save Orion Dynamics from the slow death that had been strangling the company since Marcus Cole's retirement. An $80 million contract with Meridian Industries hung in the balance. Everything depended on today's demonstration running perfectly. And something was wrong. Nathan pressed his hand against the glass, feeling the vibration travel through the metal frame. There. Every 4.7 seconds. A tiny skip in the servo timing, so subtle it barely registered. But he'd heard that exact sound before, years ago, on the first generation of the integrated encoder system. It had taken him 3 weeks to isolate the problem back then, a phase offset in the calibration algorithm that only manifested under specific load conditions. If they ran this system at full capacity with that fault active, the whole thing would tear itself apart. Nathan's hands were already moving toward the lab door when a sharp voice cut through the air. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Nathan turned. Richard Voss, Orion Dynamics chief engineering director, stood 10 feet away with his arms crossed. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of condescending smile that came from never having to doubt yourself. Behind him stood a cluster of engineers, all watching Nathan with varying degrees of curiosity and confusion. "Sir, I think there might be..." Wait, you think?" Richard's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think? That's adorable. Hey everyone, the maintenance guy thinks he found a problem with the crown jewel." A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the group. Nathan's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just heard something in the servo system that sounds like..." "Like what?" Richard stepped closer. "Like you have any idea what you're talking about? Like you understand even the basics of a level 5 integrated automation system? Let me guess. You changed some industrial air filters once, and now you're an expert on robotics?" "No, sir. This system," Richard gestured grandly toward the lab, "was designed by the best engineers in the industry. It's been tested for 6 months. We've run every possible diagnostic. Everything is perfect. But please, maintenance guy, tell us what we missed." Nathan could feel the attention of the entire hallway focused on him now. This was why he stayed invisible. This was exactly the kind of situation he'd learned to avoid. "Look, I used to work with these encoder systems. There's a vibration pattern that used to work with them?" Richard laughed outright now. "Used to work with them? Where, at your community college? Did you watch a YouTube video?" "Sir, if you just let me show you the calibration logs..." "The calibration logs are fine. Everything is fine. What's not fine is having some random contractor who can't even afford a uniform that fits trying to derail the most important day in this company's history." Richard turned to his team. "Someone get security. I want this guy off the engineering floor. Now." Nathan felt his face burning. Every instinct screamed at him to push back, to explain, to make them understand. He'd solved this exact problem before. He knew he was right. But then he saw Emma watching from her chair, eyes wide, math homework forgotten. And just like that, the fight drained out of him. Because this wasn't about being right. This was about keeping his job. This was about making sure Emma had dinner tonight and tomorrow night and every night after that. "I apologize," Nathan said quietly. "I overstepped." "Damn right you did." Richard's voice carried that satisfied tone of someone who'd just won a battle they never should have been fighting. "Now get back to whatever toilet you're supposed to be fixing and stay away from the real engineering work." Nathan nodded once, turned, and walked back to where Emma sat. He could feel every eye on him, could hear the whispered conversations starting up in his wake. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was small. "Are you in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Everything's fine." He knelt down beside her chair, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Just a misunderstanding." But even as he said it, he was still listening. And that sound, that tiny telltale vibration, was still there. Yet, the morning crawled forward. Nathan fixed David Park's HVAC rattle, loose mounting bracket, 15-minute fix. He replaced 3 ceiling panels in the executive wing. He unclogged a sink in the 4th floor break room where someone had apparently tried to dispose of an entire cafeteria salad. And all the while, he listened. The vibration in Lab 2 was getting worse. Not by much, just a fraction of a degree more pronounced. But it was there, building slowly, like pressure behind a dam that nobody realized was cracking. At 11:30 a.m., the entire engineering floor erupted into coordinated chaos. The demonstration was scheduled for 1 p.m. Meridian Industries representatives would arrive at 12:45. Everything had to be perfect. Engineers rushed between workstations, running final checks, calling out readings, their voices tight with the particular tension of people who knew their careers rode on the next 90 minutes. Claire Bennett emerged from her office looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Tailored gray suit, dark hair pulled back in a way that was professional without being severe. But Nathan had learned to read people in his years of invisibility, and he could see the strain in the way she held her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. She was terrified. "Status report," Claire said, her voice cutting through the noise. The room quieted immediately. Richard Voss stepped forward, tablet in hand. "All systems optimal, Ms. Bennett. We ran the full diagnostic suite again this morning. Every component is operating within specifications. The crown jewel is ready." "No anomalies?" "None. We're green across the board." Claire nodded, but Nathan saw her hands flex slightly at her sides. "And the backup protocols?" "In place and tested, but we won't need them. This system is bulletproof." Nathan watched this exchange from the hallway, Emma beside him finishing her math homework. He wanted to say something, wanted to walk up to that expensive CEO in her expensive suit and tell her that her chief engineer was either blind or lying, that the system wasn't bulletproof, that they were about to walk into a disaster. But Richard had made the rules clear. Maintenance guys didn't talk to CEOs. Maintenance guys stayed in their lane. Invisible. Safe. Employed. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, I'm hungry." "Okay, sweetheart, let's go find lunch." They were halfway to the elevator when the first test run began. Nathan heard the crown jewel power up, the smooth acceleration of the servo motors, the precise clicking of the robotic arms moving through their programmed sequence. For a moment, everything sounded perfect. Then he heard it again. That vibration, louder now, more insistent. He stopped walking. "Daddy?" The system was accelerating, 500 revolutions per minute, 1,000 revolutions per minute. The vibration was building with it, the frequency shifting in a way that made Nathan's stomach drop. 1,500 revolutions per minute. "Daddy, what's wrong?" 2,000 revolutions per minute. Something in the encoder timing was oscillating. The phase offset he'd heard earlier wasn't just a minor issue. It was creating a feedback loop. And feedback loops in high-speed servo systems didn't just fail gracefully. They catastrophically destroyed themselves. "Emma, stay here." Nathan was moving before he'd fully made the decision, his body operating on instinct and 3 years of suppressed engineering knowledge. He reached the lab door just as the system hit 2,200 revolutions per minute. The vibration had become a shudder. Through the reinforced glass, Nathan could see Richard and his team clustered around the control station, all of them staring at readouts that apparently still showed everything was fine. Because it was fine. All the diagnostic sensors said so. The calibration logs said so. The 6 months of testing said so. But Nathan's ears said different. 2,400 revolutions per minute. The robotic arms were moving faster now, their movements still precise but with a barely perceptible tremor. Nathan pressed his hand against the glass, feeling the vibration travel up his arm. He recognized this pattern. He'd seen this exact failure cascade before, years ago, when he was still someone who mattered. It had been his 3rd month at Orion Dynamics. Marcus Cole had put him on a rush project for a defense contractor, and Nathan had missed a similar encoder offset during the initial calibration. The prototype had torn itself apart at 2,600 revolutions per minute, sending $500,000 of equipment into catastrophic failure. Marcus had been furious, not because of the money, though that hurt, but because Nathan had ignored the warning signs, had trusted the diagnostic readouts instead of his own experience. "Never let the computer tell you what your ears already know," Marcus had said, standing in the wreckage of the failed system. "Machines lie with numbers. They tell the truth with sound." 2,500 revolutions per minute. Nathan's hand found the door handle. "Hey!" A security guard Nathan didn't recognize grabbed his arm. "This area is restricted during testing. You need to clear out." "There's a problem with the—" "Sir, please step back from the door." 2,550 revolutions per minute. Through the glass, Nathan saw Richard glance at his readouts, frown, tap the screen. 2,575 revolutions per minute. The vibration was a scream now, audible even through the reinforced walls. 2,600 revolutions per minute. "Shut it down!" Nathan shouted, yanking his arm free from the security guard. "You need to shut it down now!" But his voice was lost in the sudden chaos erupting inside the lab. Every alarm in the system triggered simultaneously. Warning lights flashed red across every monitor. The robotic arms stuttered mid-movement, their precise choreography collapsing into jerky, uncontrolled motion. And then, with a sound like a gunshot, the entire crown jewel system shut down. Emergency brakes engaged. Servo motors screamed in protest. Something deep in the encoder assembly made a grinding noise that Nathan felt in his teeth. Then silence. Complete, crushing silence. Through the lab window, Nathan watched Richard Voss stare at his readouts like they'd personally betrayed him. Other engineers were already rushing to diagnostic stations, pulling logs, checking connections, their movements sharp with barely controlled panic. Because everyone in that room understood what had just happened. The crown jewel, the system that was supposed to save Orion Dynamics, the system they'd spent 6 months perfecting, the system that needed to run flawlessly in front of Meridian Industries in less than 90 minutes, had just catastrophically failed. Claire Bennett stood frozen in the middle of the lab, her face drained of color. And Nathan Cole, the invisible maintenance guy everyone had dismissed, had tried to warn them. He turned away from the window and found Emma standing exactly where he'd left her, clutching her broken robot, watching everything with wide eyes. "Is the machine sick, Daddy?" Nathan picked up his tool bag from where he'd dropped it. "Yeah, sweetheart, the machine is sick. Can you fix it?" He looked back at the lab, where engineers were now running between stations like ants whose hill had just been kicked over. Where Richard Voss was shouting orders that nobody seemed to be following. Where Claire Bennett stood perfectly still, watching her company's future crumble in real time. "I don't think they want my help," Nathan said quietly. But even as he said it, his mind was already working through the problem. The phase offset would be in the encoder calibration matrix, probably a rounding error in the compensation algorithm. Simple fix if you knew where to look. 30 minutes, tops, if they'd let him access the diagnostic interface. They wouldn't, though. Richard had made that abundantly clear. So Nathan did what he'd learned to do over the past 3 years. He took his daughter's hand, found a quiet corner of the building, and made her a peanut butter sandwich from the supplies in his tool bag while the engineering floor descended into barely controlled chaos behind them. Check. The disaster unfolded in stages. First came the denial. Nathan listened from his spot in the hallway as Richard's voice carried through the lab doors, confident and commanding, insisting this was just a minor glitch. They'd reboot the system, run the diagnostics again, everything would be fine. The reboot failed. Then came the troubleshooting phase. Nathan could hear the frantic clicking of keyboards, the sharp exchanges as engineers pulled logs and compared readings. Someone suggested it might be a software issue. Someone else thought it was the power supply. A third voice mentioned thermal expansion. None of them mentioned the encoder calibration. The second reboot failed. Then came the blame phase. Richard's voice got louder, sharper, finding fault in everyone except himself. Someone hadn't followed protocol. Someone had modified a configuration file without authorization. Someone had failed to properly document a change. The third reboot failed. And now, with less than 30 minutes until Meridian Industries arrived, panic set in. Nathan sat with his back against the wall, Emma beside him working on a drawing. She'd moved past her math homework and was now sketching something elaborate with her colored pencils. Robots and people and machines all mixed together in the way only a 6-year-old's imagination could blend them. He tried not to listen. Tried to focus on the mundane work order on his tablet, second-floor bathroom, reported clog in Sink 3. But his ears kept pulling him back to the chaos in Lab 2. They were running the fourth reboot now. Nathan could hear the crown jewel powering up again, could track its acceleration by sound alone. 500 revolutions per minute. Smooth. 1,000 revolutions per minute. Still smooth. 1,500 revolutions per minute. There. That vibration again, right on schedule. "Daddy?" Emma held up her drawing. "Look, I made you." Nathan looked. She'd drawn a stick figure in a blue uniform with an enormous tool bag, standing next to a machine that looked vaguely like a robot. The machine had X's for eyes and a frown. "The machine is sad," Emma explained, "because it's broken, but you're going to fix it." "That's beautiful, sweetheart." 2,000 revolutions per minute. The vibration was building faster this time, the system having somehow learned nothing from its previous failure. 2,200 revolutions per minute. Nathan closed his eyes. This was torture, listening to them make the same mistake over and over, knowing exactly what was wrong, knowing he could fix it, and being completely powerless to help. Because he'd learned that lesson too. Years ago, in a different life, he'd been the guy who always had to be right, who couldn't let a problem go unsolved, who'd burn every bridge and ruin every relationship in pursuit of the perfect solution. And where had that gotten him? It had gotten Sarah killed, not directly, not in any way the grief counselor would acknowledge, but Nathan knew the truth. He'd been working 80-hour weeks on a military contract, too obsessed with solving an impossible technical problem to notice his wife was drowning in exhaustion trying to raise Emma alone. Too important to take a night off. Too valuable to the company to waste time on something as trivial as date night. So Sarah had driven to her sister's house by herself, in the rain, exhausted from another sleepless night with a teething toddler. And a drunk driver had crossed the center line on Route 7. And Nathan's entire world had ended because he'd been too busy being brilliant to be a husband. He'd made a promise at Sarah's funeral, no more being the smartest guy in the room, no more sacrificing everything for the sake of solving problems. From now on, Emma came first. Safety came first. Being invisible came first. Even if it meant sitting here listening to people fail at something he could fix with his eyes closed. 2,400 revolutions per minute. The alarm klaxon started earlier this time. "Shut it down!" Richard's voice carried through the walls. "Emergency stop! Now!" The crown jewel died for the 4th time. Nathan heard something crash inside the lab, someone swearing viciously. Claire Bennett's voice, tight and controlled, asking a question he couldn't quite make out. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can I tell you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. I think you should help them." Nathan looked at his daughter, 6 years old, still believed her daddy could fix anything, didn't understand yet how the world really worked, how people like Richard Voss decided whose expertise mattered and whose didn't. "It's complicated, Em. But you know what's wrong. I can tell." Kids were terrifyingly perceptive sometimes. "Even if I do," Nathan said carefully, "they don't want my help. They have their own engineers. Their engineers are doing it wrong." Emma said it with the absolute certainty of a child who'd just watched 4 consecutive failures. "Mommy used to say that sometimes the quietest person in the room knows the most. She said that about you." Nathan felt something crack in his chest. Sarah had said that. Multiple times. Usually when Nathan had been sitting quietly in a meeting, letting louder voices dominate, waiting for the exact right moment to speak. She'd admired that about him, called it strategic patience, said it was his superpower. "Mommy was very smart," Nathan said softly. "So are you." Emma turned back to her drawing, adding more details to the sad robot. "That's why you should help." Before Nathan could respond, he heard rapid footsteps in the hallway. David Park appeared, moving fast, his face flushed. "Mr. Cole!" David skidded to a stop. "Do you have a second?" Nathan stood up carefully. "What's up?" David glanced around, lowered his voice. "Look, I know this is weird, but Richard just told us we have 20 minutes to fix the crown jewel or we're all fired. And I heard what you said earlier about the encoder system. David, I pulled your employment records." David said it fast, like he was confessing to a crime. "I got curious after Richard kicked you out. You're Nathan Cole. You worked here 5 years ago. You have 3 patents. You were Marcus Cole's lead engineer before he retired." Nathan's stomach dropped. "That's not relevant anymore." "The hell it isn't. You knew what was wrong with the system. You tried to warn us. And your boss made it very clear what he thought of my warning." "Richard's an ass." David said it with the particular venom of someone who'd been holding that opinion for a while. "He's been skating by on other people's work for 2 years. But Ms. Bennett isn't an ass. She's just desperate. And if you actually know how to fix this..." Nathan looked down at Emma, who was watching this conversation with intense interest. Even if I could help, Nathan said slowly, why would I? Richard humiliated me in front of everyone. He called security on me. Why would I save his career? You wouldn't be saving Richard's career, Nika. David's voice was urgent now. You'd be saving the jobs of 63 engineers who did nothing wrong except work for a guy who's too proud to admit when he's made a mistake. You'd be saving Ms. Bennett's company. She's a good person, Mr. Cole. She inherited this mess when her father died, and she's been trying to fix it ever since. And yeah, maybe she should have stepped in when Richard went after you, but she's got the weight of the whole company on her shoulders, and sometimes good people make bad calls in the moment. Nathan wanted to say no, wanted to protect himself and Emma from the inevitable complications that would come from getting involved. But David was right. There were 63 engineers in there whose careers had nothing to do with Richard Voss's ego. There was Claire Bennett, who'd lost her father and inherited a company on the edge of collapse. There were probably 100 other employees throughout the building whose livelihoods depended on that Meridian contract going through. And Nathan knew with absolute certainty that he could fix their problem. Daddy, Emma said quietly, you should help them. Nathan looked at his daughter, looked at David Park's desperate face, looked at his own hands, calloused now from 3 years of maintenance work, but still carrying the muscle memory of 1,000 complex engineering solutions. If I help, Nathan said carefully, Richard's going to lose his mind. Probably, David admitted, and there's no guarantee Claire will even listen to me. True, and I might not be able to fix it in 20 minutes. That's a risk. Nathan picked up his tool bag. Then let's go see if the CEO of Orion Dynamics is willing to trust a maintenance guy one more time. Emma gathered up her drawings and her broken robot, following behind as Nathan and David headed toward Lab 2. Nathan's heart was pounding. This was a mistake. This was breaking every rule he'd made for himself. This was exactly the kind of thing that led to complications and instability and all the chaos he'd spent 3 years avoiding. But maybe, just maybe, it was also the right thing to do. They reached the lab doors just as another engineer emerged, looking shell-shocked. How bad? David asked. Bad. Richard just told Ms. Bennett we might need to cancel the demonstration. Through the glass, Nathan could see Claire standing very still in the center of the chaos, her composed mask finally cracking. She looked lost, alone. Exactly how Nathan had felt standing in the hospital 3 years ago while a doctor explained that his wife hadn't survived the surgery. Wait here, Nathan told Emma, getting her settled in her chair. This might take a few minutes. Fix the sad robot, Daddy. I'll try, sweetheart. Nathan took a breath, pushed open the lab door, and stepped back into a world he'd thought he'd left behind forever. The lab fell silent as he entered. 63 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the maintenance guy in the borrowed uniform, carrying a tool bag held together with electrical tape. Richard Voss went purple. You have got to be kidding me! Security! I want this man! Wait! Claire Bennett's voice cut through the room like a knife. She was staring at Nathan with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're the one who tried to warn us, earlier, about the servo system. Yes, ma'am. And you were removed from the floor. Yes, ma'am. Claire turned to Richard. Why was he removed? Richard sputtered. Because he's a maintenance worker who was interfering with... I asked him. Claire's eyes didn't leave Nathan's face. Why were you removed from the floor? Nathan could have made excuses, could have downplayed what happened, but something in Claire's expression told him she wanted the truth. Because I heard a problem with your encoder calibration system and tried to point it out. Mr. Voss felt I was overstepping my expertise. And what exactly is your expertise? This was it. The moment where Nathan either stepped back into his old life or walked away forever. He thought of Emma, waiting outside with her broken robot and her absolute faith that her daddy could fix anything. He thought of Sarah, telling him that the quietest person in the room knows the most. He thought of Marcus Cole, teaching him that machines tell the truth with sound. 5 years ago, Nathan said quietly, I was the lead systems engineer for the original integrated encoder project. I worked on the calibration algorithms that your crown jewel is based on, and I know exactly what's wrong with your system because I've seen this failure pattern before. The silence in the lab was absolute. Richard found his voice first. That's impossible. Marcus Cole's lead engineer was... He stopped, looked at Nathan more carefully. Nathan Cole. I thought you were dead. Just invisible, Nathan said, but I'm here now. And you've got about 15 minutes before Meridian walks through that door, so maybe we can deal with your ego later and focus on saving your company first. Claire Bennett looked at Nathan for a long moment. Then she looked at the dead production line, then at her watch. Talk, she said. Fast. Nathan dropped his tool bag and headed straight for the diagnostic terminal. And for the first time in 3 years, he stopped being invisible. Nathan's fingers moved across the diagnostic terminal before Claire had finished speaking. Muscle memory took over. The keyboard shortcuts, the navigation paths through the system architecture, all of it buried under 3 years of changing air filters and unclogging drains, but still there, waiting. Jesus Christ, one of the younger engineers muttered. He's not even looking at the interface map. Nathan wasn't. He didn't need to. The Crown Jewel's software architecture was a direct descendant of the system he designed half a decade ago. Different front end, upgraded components, but the bones were the same, and Bones didn't forget. What are you doing? Richard's voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. He stood 10 feet back, arms crossed, watching Nathan work with the expression of a man watching his credibility evaporate in real time. Pulling the encoder event logs from the last 4 startups. Nathan's eyes tracked across the screen, parsing data streams most people would need an hour to decode. You ran full system diagnostics, right? Of course we did, multiple times. And they all came back clean. Yes, that's because you were running the wrong diagnostics. Nathan pulled up a secondary window, fingers flying. The standard test suite checks for hardware faults and software exceptions. It's looking for things that are broken. But your problem isn't broken. It's just wrong. Claire moved closer, her heels clicking on the lab floor. Explain. Nathan pointed to a cascade of numbers scrolling across the screen. See this? Your encoder calibration matrix. Every value here is within acceptable parameters. Any diagnostic tool would pass it. But look at the phase compensation algorithm. He pulled up a second data stream, overlaying it against the first. The numbers looked identical to everyone else in the room. Nathan saw the ghost of a mistake. There. He highlighted a section of code. Your compensation timing is using a 32-bit floating point calculation. Standard practice. Works fine 99% of the time. But when you hit specific RPM thresholds under load, the rounding errors accumulate into a phase offset. That's impossible, Richard said. We tested this system for 6 months. You tested it for endurance, long runs at steady speed. Nathan didn't look up from the screen. But you never stressed it through rapid acceleration cycles in the critical range, which is exactly what happens during startup when you're showing off for investors. The system hits 2,000 revolutions per minute clean, so you think you're golden. But between 2,000 and 2,600, the phase offset builds up like interest on a loan you forgot about. By the time you hit the failure threshold, the encoder thinks the servo position is 0.3 degrees off from where it actually is. 0.3 degrees? Another engineer spoke up, sounding skeptical. That's nothing. At 2,600 revolutions per minute? That's everything. Nathan pulled up a simulation window, his hands moving with the kind of certainty that came from having debugged this exact problem before. Watch. I'll show you what happens. He ran the simulation. The room watched as the virtual crown jewel powered up, accelerated smoothly through 1,500 revolutions per minute, 2,000 revolutions per minute, and then started to shudder at 2,400 revolutions per minute before catastrophically failing at 2,637 revolutions per minute. The exact revolutions per minute where the real system had died. 4 times. The silence in the lab was profound. How long have you known about this? Claire's voice was very quiet. I heard the vibration signature this morning, around 8. Nathan finally looked up from the screen. Tried to mention it. Didn't go well. Every eye in the room turned to Richard Voss, whose face had gone from purple to a sickly gray. You shut down a credible warning, Claire said, her voice still quiet, but with an edge that could cut steel. Because you didn't like who it came from. I didn't know he was... You didn't ask. Claire's composure was cracking now, anger bleeding through the careful professional mask. You didn't ask about his background. You didn't ask him to explain his reasoning. You just assumed he was nobody and had him removed. Ms. Bennett, How long to fix it? Claire cut him off. turning back to Nathan. Nathan checked his watch. 12:17. Meridian would arrive in 28 minutes. If the fix is what I think it is, 20 minutes. Maybe 25. You have 15. That's tight. Then I suggest you stop talking and start typing. Nathan felt a smile tug at the corner of his mouth, despite everything. He liked her. Claire Bennett had ice in her veins and pragmatism in her bones. No wonder she'd kept the company alive this long. I'm going to need access to the calibration kernel, Nathan said, and someone who actually knows where you stored the backup compensation files. David! Claire snapped her fingers at David Park, who practically jumped to attention. Get him whatever he needs. Everyone else, clear out. Give him space to work. The engineering team scattered like startled birds. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Miss Bennett, I really think... Mr. Voss? Claire's voice could have frozen nitrogen. Either make yourself useful or get out of the lab. Those are your options. Richard got out of the lab. Nathan was already diving into the code, David pulling up a chair beside him to help navigate the filing system. The calibration kernel was buried 3 layers deep in the system architecture, protected by safety locks that required 2-factor authentication to modify. I'll need your credentials, Nathan said to David. Here. David rattled off a username and password without hesitation. You're just going to give those to a maintenance guy? Another engineer, Nathan didn't catch his name, sounded incredulous. He's not a maintenance guy, David said, not looking away from the screen. He's Nathan Cole, and right now he's the only thing standing between us and unemployment. Nathan accessed the calibration kernel and immediately saw the problem. Someone, probably Richard, probably during the final optimization phase, had modified the phase compensation algorithm to squeeze out an extra 2% efficiency. On paper, it looked brilliant. In practice, it had introduced a cascading rounding error that only manifested under specific conditions, the kind of conditions nobody would test for unless they'd seen this exact failure before. Which Nathan had. I need the original compensation matrix, Nathan said, the one from the Generation 3 encoder system. Should be in the legacy code archive. David's fingers flew across his own terminal. Found it. Sending it to your workspace now. The file appeared on Nathan's screen. 53 kilobytes of code he'd written 5 years ago, back when he'd been someone else. He opened it, and the familiarity hit him like a physical thing. Every function, every variable name, every comment in the margins. This was his work, his solution to a problem nobody else had been able to crack. And now it was going to save his old company one more time. Nathan began extracting the relevant sections, adapting them to the Crown Jewel's updated architecture. His hands moved automatically, the code flowing like a language he'd spoken fluently once and was now remembering how to speak again. It felt strange. It felt terrifying. It felt like coming home after a long exile. You're doing a live kernel modification, David said, watching the code scroll past. That's insane. If you make a mistake, well, then we're no worse off than we are now. Nathan didn't slow down. But I'm not going to make a mistake. He said it with absolute certainty because this wasn't arrogance. This was mastery. Nathan knew this code the way a concert pianist knew Chopin. Every note, every rhythm, every subtle dynamic that made the difference between competent and transcendent. 7 minutes gone. Claire appeared at his shoulder. Talk to me. Replacing the compensation algorithm with a 64-bit implementation should eliminate the rounding error cascade, but I need to test it before we run the full system. We don't have time for a full test cycle. Then we'll do a partial, 60 seconds at the critical RPM range. If it holds, we're good. And if it doesn't? Nathan saved his changes, committed them to the system kernel, and finally looked at Claire. Then I'm wrong, and you're out $80 million. But I'm not wrong. Claire held his gaze for a long moment. Nathan could see her doing the calculation. Trust the maintenance guy who claimed to be an expert, or trust the 6 months of testing that had all pointed to a perfect system that had just failed 4 times in a row. Run your test, Claire said. Nathan triggered the modified startup sequence. The Crown Jewel hummed to life, its servo motors spinning up with that distinctive whine that Nathan had heard 1,000 times before. Around him, the remaining engineers held their breath. 500 revolutions per minute. Smooth. 1,000 revolutions per minute. Clean. 1,500 revolutions per minute. Nathan listened for the vibration. Nothing. 2,000 revolutions per minute. Still nothing. We're approaching the failure threshold, David said quietly. 2,200 revolutions per minute. The room was silent except for the sound of the machines. Nathan closed his eyes, listening with every ounce of his concentration. The vibration pattern that had haunted the system all morning was gone. In its place, just the smooth harmonic hum of properly synchronized components. 2,400 revolutions per minute. 2,500 revolutions per minute. 2,600 revolutions per minute. The speed where the system had died 4 times before. Nathan's heart was hammering in his chest, but the crown jewel just kept running, its robotic arms moving through their programmed choreography without a single stutter. 2,800 revolutions per minute, operating above the normal threshold now, pushing into the margins just to prove the point. "Shut it down," Claire said softly. Nathan triggered the controlled stop. The crown jewel spun down gracefully, its movements precise until the very last rotation. When the system went quiet, nobody spoke for a long moment. Then David Park started clapping. Slow at first, then faster, and within seconds the entire remaining engineering team had joined in. Not the polite applause of a corporate presentation, but the genuine appreciation of people who'd just watched someone save their careers. Nathan felt his face flush. He wasn't used to this anymore. Wasn't used to being seen. "How much time?" Claire asked. Nathan checked his watch. 12:39. 6 minutes before Meridian arrives. "Then we run it one more time. Full demonstration sequence. If it works, we're golden. If it fails..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Nathan pulled up the demonstration protocol. 3 minutes of choreographed movement, the crown jewel running through a simulated production cycle that would showcase every capability Meridian Industries was paying for. It was an impressive routine. Whoever had programmed it knew what they were doing. Probably Richard, back when he was still competent instead of just confident. "Initiating full sequence," Nathan said. The crown jewel came alive again. This time there was no hesitation, no nervous watching of the RPM counter. The system moved through its paces like a dancer who'd finally found the right rhythm. Robotic arms pivoted and reached, components moved along conveyor tracks, the whole thing orchestrated with mechanical precision that bordered on artistry. Nathan watched the encoder readings. Perfect synchronization. Zero-phase offset. The 64-bit compensation algorithm was handling the rounding errors exactly as designed, bleeding off the accumulated precision loss before it could cascade into instability. The demonstration sequence completed. The crown jewel returned to its home position and went into standby mode. 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Flawless. "That's what we needed," Claire said. She was smiling now, really smiling, and Nathan realized she was younger than he'd thought. The CEO mask had added years. Without it, she looked like someone in her early 30s trying desperately to hold together something too big for any one person to carry. He knew that feeling intimately. "Ms. Bennett?" An assistant appeared at the lab door. "Meridian Industries just pulled into the parking garage." The smile vanished from Claire's face, replaced by the composed mask again. "All right, David, pull up the demonstration protocol. Make sure every monitor is showing the right displays. Someone find Richard and tell him to get back in here and act professional." She paused, then turned to Nathan. "You should probably..." She gestured vaguely at his maintenance uniform. Nathan looked down at himself. Borrowed uniform with someone else's name, tool bag held together with electrical tape. 3 days of stubble because he'd been too tired to shave that morning. He looked exactly like what he was, a guy who'd been cleaning bathrooms an hour ago. "I have a jacket in my office," Claire said quickly. "It won't fit perfect, but it's better than..." Again with the vague gesture. "Ms. Bennett, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not part of the demonstration. I fixed your code. That's all you needed." "No." Claire's voice was firm. "You're staying. Meridian is going to ask questions. Technical questions. And I need someone in the room who can actually answer them." Richard, Claire said with careful precision, "is the reason we almost lost this contract. You're the reason we didn't, so you're staying." Nathan opened his mouth to argue, then caught sight of Emma through the lab window. She was still in her chair in the hallway, now coloring a new picture while keeping one eye on the lab. She gave him a little wave when she saw him looking. "My daughter," Nathan said. Claire glanced through the window, saw Emma, and something in her expression softened. Bring her in. We have a conference table in the back of the lab. She can draw there. It's better than leaving her alone in the hallway. Before Nathan could respond, David was already heading for the door. A minute later, Emma appeared carrying her drawing supplies and her broken robot, looking around the lab with wide eyes. Wow, she breathed. This is where you fix the sad robots, Daddy? Sometimes, Nathan said, getting her settled at the conference table. But you need to be very quiet now, okay? Some important people are coming. Okay. Emma pulled out her colored pencils and went to work on her drawing with the intense focus that meant she'd be occupied for at least 20 minutes. Nathan turned back to find Claire holding a charcoal blazer. It's going to be big on you, but it's better than Rodriguez. Nathan looked at the blazer, then at his uniform, then at Claire's determined expression. He took off the maintenance shirt, revealing a plain gray t-shirt underneath, and put on the blazer. Claire was right. It was too big in the shoulders and too long in the arms, but it covered the t-shirt and made him look at least marginally more professional. Better, Claire said, then quieter. Thank you. For fixing this. For staying. For not walking away when you had every right to. Nathan didn't know what to say to that. He settled for a nod. The lab door opened and Richard Voss walked in, his earlier bluster replaced by something that looked like shell shock. He saw Nathan in the blazer and his jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Smart man, Nathan thought. Read the room. They're coming up in the elevator, the assistant called from the doorway. Claire took a breath, rolled her shoulders back, and became the CEO again. Poised. Confident. In complete control of a situation that had been spiraling into disaster 20 minutes ago. Everyone ready? She asked. The engineering team nodded. David gave Nathan a quick thumbs up from across the lab. Richard stood by the control station looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. And Nathan, the invisible maintenance guy who'd spent 3 years avoiding exactly this kind of attention, stood near the diagnostic terminal in an ill-fitting blazer and waited for the people who held Orion Dynamics' future in their hands. The elevator chimed in the hallway. Here we go, Nathan thought. The door opened and 3 people entered. 2 men in expensive suits that screamed corporate money and a woman who looked like she ate struggling companies for breakfast and didn't bother with lunch. Helena Cortez, VP of Strategic Acquisitions for Meridian Industries. Nathan recognized her from the business news. She had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and utterly unimpressed by failure. Ms. Bennett? Helena's handshake was brief and professional. I hope we're not too early. Perfect timing, Claire said smoothly. We're ready when you are. Helena's eyes swept the lab, taking in the crown jewel, the engineering team, the diagnostic displays. Her gaze paused on Nathan for a fraction of a second, noting the ill-fitting blazer probably, then moved on. We've reviewed your technical specifications, Helena said. Very impressive on paper, but we've learned to be skeptical of demonstrations. Too easy to fake perfect conditions. I understand completely, Claire said. That's why we're not running a canned demo. You can specify any production sequence you'd like to see. Any speed, any complexity. The crown jewel can handle it. One of Helena's colleagues stepped forward. We'd like to see rapid acceleration through the critical operating range, followed by sustained high-speed precision work. That's where most systems fail. Nathan felt his stomach drop. That was exactly the profile that would have destroyed the system 30 minutes ago. Before his fix, Claire didn't flinch. Absolutely. Richard, can you program that sequence? Richard looked like he'd been asked to juggle chainsaws. Ms. Bennett, perhaps we should stick to the standard demonstration. They asked for rapid acceleration and high-speed precision. Claire's voice was pleasant, but left no room for argument. So that's what we'll give them. Richard's hands were shaking slightly as he approached the control terminal. Nathan moved closer, close enough to see the programming interface. You're setting the acceleration curve too shallow, Nathan said quietly. They asked for rapid. Give them rapid. Richard's eyes flicked to him with pure hatred, but his hands adjusted the parameters. Nathan watched the numbers, mentally calculating the stress loads and timing sequences. Peak RPM at 2,800, Nathan said. Show them we can operate above spec. That's outside the recommended range. The system can handle it. Nathan said it with certainty because he'd built the compensation algorithm that made it possible. Trust me. Richard clearly didn't trust him, but he also clearly understood that fighting in front of the investors was a losing play. He set the peak RPM to 2,800. "Ready when you are," Claire said to Helena. Helena nodded. "Show us what you've got." Richard triggered the sequence. The crown jewel exploded into motion, not the smooth, gentle acceleration of a standard demonstration, but an aggressive ramp-up that showcased raw power. The servo motors screamed as they spun up, hitting 1,500 revolutions per minute in under 8 seconds. Nathan listened. No vibration, no phase offset, just clean, synchronized power. 2,000 revolutions per minute. The robotic arms were moving now, grabbing phantom components from phantom conveyor belts. The whole system running through a simulated production cycle at speeds that would destroy most equipment. 2,400 revolutions per minute. Helena was watching the diagnostic displays, her expression unreadable. Her colleagues were taking notes on tablets. 2,600 revolutions per minute, the speed where the old calibration had failed catastrophically. The crown jewel blew past it without a hiccup, 2,800 revolutions per minute, operating at the absolute limit of its design specifications, every component stressed to the edge of its tolerances. The noise in the lab was incredible, mechanical symphony of precision engineering pushed to its maximum. And then, exactly as programmed, the system transitioned into the precision work phase. Still running at 2,800 revolutions per minute, but now the robotic arms were performing delicate assembly operations, placing imaginary components with micrometer accuracy while the whole system vibrated with barely contained power. It was showing off. That's what this was. The crown jewel doing backflips to prove it could. Nathan found himself grinning despite the tension. This was what he'd loved about engineering. The moment when math and metal came together to do something that seemed impossible. The pure satisfaction of watching a system perform exactly as designed, exactly as the equations predicted. 3 minutes of sustained high-speed precision work, then a controlled shutdown that was smooth as glass. Silence in the lab. Helena Cortez walked up to the crown jewel, examining it closely. She ran her hand along one of the robotic arms, checking for heat stress or vibration damage. "You said we could specify any sequence," she said finally. "Could you run that again, but this time with randomized component weights? I want to see how it handles dynamic load balancing." Richard went pale. Dynamic load balancing was the hardest thing to program correctly. Most systems needed days of tuning to handle it properly. "Of course," Claire said. "Richard, can you—" "I'll do it," Nathan said. Everyone turned to look at him. Helena's eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing him. "And you are?" she asked. Nathan almost said maintenance worker, almost fell back into the safety of invisibility. But he looked at Claire's face, at David's hopeful expression, at Emma drawing quietly at the conference table. "Nathan Cole," he said. "I wrote the calibration algorithms this system is based on." "Cole." Helena's expression shifted. "You're Marcus Cole's protege, the one who disappeared 5 years ago." "I took some time away from the industry. Clearly." Helena gestured at his borrowed blazer. "And now you're back." Nathan glanced at Claire, who was watching this exchange with barely concealed anxiety. "Just consulting today, but yeah, I can program dynamic load balancing." "Do it," Helena said. Nathan moved to the control terminal. Richard stepped aside without a word, his face unreadable. The programming interface was more sophisticated than what Nathan remembered, but the underlying logic was the same. Dynamic load balancing required the system to adjust its timing and power distribution in real time based on the weight of the components being handled. Most engineers approached it as a predictive problem, trying to calculate in advance what adjustments would be needed. Nathan had always approached it differently. He coded the system to listen to itself, to feel the tiny variations in motor resistance and encoder feedback, and adjust on the fly. It was more art than science, required an intuitive understanding of how machines actually behaved versus how the textbook said they should behave. It took him 8 minutes to write the routine. "Ready," Nathan said. Helena nodded. "Run it." This time, the crown jewel's movements were less choreographed, more organic. The robotic arms reached for components of randomized weights, and Nathan could see the system making tiny adjustments in real time. A heavier component triggered a fractional increase in power to the shoulder joint. A lighter one reduced the grip pressure to avoid crushing. It was beautiful. Mechanical improvisation, the system adapting and responding like it was alive. Helena watched for 2 minutes, then nodded slowly. Impressive, very impressive. She turned to Claire. We had concerns about this contract. The timeline seemed aggressive. The promises seemed ambitious, but what I'm seeing here changes the calculation. Claire's professional mask didn't crack, but Nathan saw her hands relax slightly at her sides. We're prepared to move forward, Helena continued, with one condition. The room held its breath. We want him, Helena pointed at Nathan, as the lead technical consultant on the integration phase. Non-negotiable. Nathan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. That's acceptable, Claire said quickly. Ms. Bennett, I can't. Claire turned to him, and her eyes said, please. Said, I'm drowning. Said, I need you. Nathan looked at Emma, who had stopped drawing and was watching with her too perceptive 6-year-old eyes. I have a daughter, Nathan said to Helena. I can't do 80-hour weeks anymore. We're not asking for 80 hours, Helena said. We're asking for expertise, which you clearly have. Work whatever schedule works for you. Just be available when we need you. It was a trap. Nathan knew it was a trap. The moment he said yes, he'd be pulled back into the world he'd left behind. The late nights, the impossible problems, the slow erosion of everything else in his life until work was all that remained. But he looked at Claire's face, at David's hopeful expression, at the 63 engineers whose jobs depended on this contract. And he heard Sarah's voice in his head. Sometimes the quietest person in the room knows the most. Flexible hours, Nathan said. And I'm bringing my daughter to the office when I need to. Those are my conditions. Helena smiled. Deal. She extended her hand. Nathan shook it, feeling like he'd just signed something more binding than a contract. We'll have our legal team draw up the paperwork, Helena said to Claire. Expect it by end of week. Congratulations, Ms. Bennett. You've got your contract. The handshakes that followed were professional and brief. Helena and her colleagues left with the brisk efficiency of people who'd gotten what they came for and had 6 other meetings that day. The moment the elevator doors closed, the lab exploded into cheers. Engineers were hugging, high-fiving, some of the younger ones looking close to tears of relief. David picked up a stapler and threw it in the air in celebration, then had to duck when it came back down. Claire stood in the middle of it all, still composed, but Nathan could see her shoulders shaking slightly. The weight she'd been carrying hadn't disappeared, but it had gotten measurably lighter. She walked over to where Nathan stood by the terminal. Thank you, she said quietly under the noise of the celebration. I don't have words for what you just did. I programmed a load balancing routine. It's not exactly heroic. You saved this company. You saved 63 jobs. You saved my reputation. Claire's voice was fierce now. Don't minimize that. Nathan didn't know what to say. He'd spent 3 years learning how to be invisible, how to not matter. Having someone tell him he'd saved everything felt like speaking a language he'd forgotten. Daddy! Emma appeared at his side, holding up her latest drawing. Look, I made the robot happy now. Nathan looked at the picture. The same sad robot from before, but now it had a smile and stars around its head. And next to it, the stick figure in the blue uniform, now wearing what looked like a blazer made of purple crayon. That's beautiful, sweetheart. The robot's not sad anymore because you fixed it. Emma said it like it was the simplest truth in the world. You always fix things. Claire knelt down to Emma's level. Your daddy is very smart. Did you know that? Emma nodded seriously. Mommy used to say he was the smartest person she knew. She said his brain was like a computer, but nicer. Something passed across Claire's face. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. Your mommy sounds like she was very wise. She was. Emma's voice got quieter. But she's in heaven now. I'm sorry, Claire said, and Nathan could tell she meant it. Emma shrugged with the resilience of a child who'd learned too young that sad things happened and you just had to keep going. It's okay. Daddy takes care of me now, and he's really good at it. Nathan felt his throat tighten. He picked up Emma, settled her on his hip even though she was getting too big for it. Come on, kiddo, let's get your stuff. Time to go home. Mr. Cole, Claire stood up. Can we talk? Tomorrow maybe? About the consulting arrangement. Nathan hesitated. Every instinct screamed to say no, to walk away while he still could, to protect the quiet life he'd built. But he'd crossed a line today. He'd stopped being invisible. And there was no going back to pretending he was nobody special, not after Helena Cortez had shaken his hand in front of everyone. Tomorrow, Nathan agreed. But late afternoon. I need to pick Emma up from school. 4 o'clock. My office. Nathan nodded, then carried his daughter toward the lab door. Behind him, the celebration was still going strong. He could hear Richard's voice trying to insert himself back into the narrative, claiming credit for contingency planning or some such nonsense. Let him, Nathan thought. He didn't need the credit. He just needed to make sure Emma was fed and happy and felt loved. They were almost to the elevator when David caught up with them. Mr. Cole, wait. David was slightly out of breath. I just wanted to say, what you did today was incredible. Like, I've been working here for 2 years and I've never seen anyone code that fast. The way you just understood the system, the way you... He stopped, seeming to realize he was gushing. Anyway, thank you for not letting us fail. You would have figured it out eventually, Nathan said. No. David shook his head. We wouldn't have. Richard would have kept rebooting the system until Meridian walked away, and then we'd all be updating our resumes. You saved us. Own that. Nathan didn't have a response. He just nodded, adjusted Emma in his arms, and headed for the elevator. They rode down in silence. Emma rested her head on his shoulder, tired from the long day. Nathan could feel his own exhaustion creeping in, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving behind the familiar weight of responsibility and complicated decisions. In the parking garage, Nathan strapped Emma into her car seat in his 12-year-old Honda. The car needed new brake pads and the check engine light had been on for a month, but it ran and it was paid off, and that's what mattered. Daddy? Emma's voice was sleepy. Are you going to work here again, like before? I don't know, sweetheart. I think you should. The people there need you. That lady with the nice suit, she looked really worried until you fixed the robot. Out of the mouths of babes, Nathan thought. Emma saw things clearly because she didn't have years of complications and fears clouding her vision. We'll see, Nathan said. He started the car and they drove home through afternoon traffic. Nathan's mind was churning, processing the day's events, trying to figure out what happened next. The consulting work would pay better than maintenance shifts. That was good. Emma needed new shoes and the apartment's hot water heater was making concerning noises. But consulting meant pressure, meant expectations, meant becoming someone visible again. Could he do that? Could he be Nathan Cole, the engineer, instead of Nathan Cole, the guy who fixed things nobody else noticed? Did he even have a choice anymore? They pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex. 3rd floor walk-up, 1 bedroom that Emma had, and 1 pull-out couch that Nathan slept on. Small, cramped, safe. Emma had fallen asleep in the car seat. Nathan carried her upstairs, got her settled on the couch with her blankets and her broken robot. He still needed to fix that. Add it to the list. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Claire Bennett. David gave me your number. I wanted to thank you again for today. Also, I had payroll cut you a check for the consulting work. You can pick it up tomorrow when we meet. It's not as much as you deserve, but it's a start. Nathan stared at the message. The consulting work. Right. He'd actually earned money today doing engineering work instead of maintenance work. That was something. He typed a response. Thank you. See you at 4. Short, professional. Gave away nothing of the chaos in his head. Nathan set down his phone and looked around his small apartment. At Emma, sleeping on the couch. At the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. At his reflection in the darkened TV screen. A tired-looking 32-year-old in a borrowed blazer that didn't fit, still trying to figure out who he was supposed to be. 3 years ago, he'd walked away from engineering because he thought it had cost him everything. Today, he'd walked back into it because people needed help, and he was the only one who could give it. Tomorrow, he'd figure out if that had been the right choice. But tonight, he was just tired. Nathan took off the blazer, hung it carefully on a chair, he'd need to return it to Claire, and went to check on Emma. She was sleeping soundly, her broken robot tucked under one arm, a slight smile on her face. Whatever happened next, Nathan thought, he'd make sure Emma stayed safe, stayed happy, stayed loved. Everything else was negotiable. Nathan woke at 5:47 a.m. to the sound of Emma singing in the bathroom. Something about robots and rainbows, her own composition, completely off key and absolutely perfect. He lay on the pull-out couch for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like a giraffe, and tried to remember the last time he'd slept well. Not last night, that was certain. He'd spent hours replaying the scene in Lab 2, analyzing his own decisions, second-guessing the moment he'd agreed to consult for Meridian. The check Claire mentioned sat in his mind like a weight, unearned maybe, or earned too easily, or earned at a cost he hadn't fully calculated yet. His phone showed 3 missed calls from the staffing agency. Right. He was supposed to be at a plumbing supply warehouse this morning, replacing overhead lighting. Nathan stared at the missed calls and felt something twist in his chest. That was his real job, the maintenance work. The invisible work that paid $18.50 an hour and kept Emma fed. Yesterday had been an anomaly, a brief moment of being someone else. He called the agency back. "Cole, where the hell are you?" The dispatcher sounded irritated. "You were supposed to clock in 40 minutes ago." "I know. I'm sorry. I can't make it today." "Can't make it?" "You're scheduled. We have a client waiting." "Send someone else. I'll take the absence hit." "This is your 3rd call out this month, Cole. Keep this up and we're going to have to..." Cool. Whoa. Nathan hung up. His hands were shaking slightly. 3 years of perfect attendance, of never missing a shift, of being reliable to the point of invisibility. And now he was burning bridges because Claire Bennett wanted to meet at 4 o'clock. Except that wasn't quite true, was it? He'd taken the day off because he didn't know how to be a maintenance worker today. Didn't know how to go back to unclogging drains and replacing light fixtures when yesterday he'd saved an $80 million contract with code he'd written in 8 minutes. "Daddy?" Emma appeared in the doorway, toothbrush hanging from her mouth. "Why do you look sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetheart, just thinking." "About the robots?" "About work." Emma climbed onto the pull-out couch, careful not to spill toothpaste. "Are you going back to the robot place today?" "This afternoon. I have a meeting." "Can I come?" Nathan started to say no, then remembered Helena Cortez's words. "Work whatever schedule works for you." Those were my conditions, he'd said. Flexible hours. And bringing Emma when he needed to. Well, he needed to today. Mrs. Chen downstairs usually watched Emma after school, but asking her to take a full day felt like too much. "Yeah," Nathan said. "You can come, but you have to be quiet during the meeting." "I'm always quiet." Emma said this despite being the least quiet 6-year-old Nathan had ever met. But she meant well. They went through their morning routine. Breakfast was scrambled eggs and toast. Emma talking non-stop about a dream she'd had involving purple elephants and rocket ships. Nathan listened with half his attention while the other half churned through everything he needed to say to Claire. Set boundaries. Make expectations clear. Don't get pulled into being someone you can't sustain being. The check. He kept coming back to the check. How much would it be? Enough to fix the car? Enough to buy Emma new shoes and maybe replace the hot water heater before it died completely? Enough to make him want to keep saying yes? At 3:47 p.m., Nathan pulled into the Orion Dynamics parking garage with Emma in the back seat, her backpack full of coloring supplies and the still broken robot. He'd meant to fix it last night, add it to the list of things he'd meant to do. The lobby felt different today. Yesterday, Nathan had been invisible, just another contractor passing through. Today, the security guard looked at him with recognition. "Mr. Cole, right? Miss Bennett said you'd be coming. Head on up." Mr. Cole. Not just the maintenance guy. Something had shifted and Nathan wasn't sure if he liked it. They rode the elevator to the executive floor. Emma pressed her nose against the glass wall, watching the atrium drop away below them. "This place is so tall," she said. "Do the robots live at the top?" "The robots are on the 3rd floor. This is where the boss works." "The nice lady with the worried face?" "Yeah, her." The elevator opened onto a floor Nathan had only seen once before, years ago when Marcus Cole had brought him up to meet the board of directors. Everything was glass and chrome and carefully curated art that probably cost more than Nathan's annual salary. A receptionist sat at a curved desk that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. "Nathan Cole," he said, "I have a 4 o'clock with Ms. Bennett." The receptionist smiled professionally. "She's expecting you. Conference room B, just down the hall." Her eyes flicked to Emma. "And who's this?" "My daughter, Emma." "Well, Emma, there's a kids' corner in the waiting area if you get bored. Books and puzzles." Emma's eyes lit up. Nathan made a mental note of that location for emergency extraction if the meeting ran long. Conference room B had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Claire was already there, sitting at a table that could seat 12 but currently held just her laptop and a leather portfolio. She'd traded yesterday's gray suit for navy blue, her hair pulled back in the same efficient style. She stood when Nathan entered. "You came. You said 4 o'clock. I wasn't sure you would." Claire gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. And Emma, there are markers and paper on the side table if you'd like to draw." Emma needed no further invitation. She claimed her spot and immediately began creating something elaborate involving her favorite subject: robots. Nathan sat across from Claire, acutely aware that he was wearing jeans and a faded button-down shirt that had seen better days. Claire didn't seem to notice or care. First things first. She slid an envelope across the table. The consulting fee for yesterday. Nathan opened it. The check inside was for $12,000. He stared at the number, certain he'd misread it. 12,000. For what? 6 hours of work? Less? That's too much, Nathan said. It's not even close to enough. Claire's voice was firm. You saved an $80 million contract. 12,000 is a rounding error. I wrote some code and fixed a calibration issue. That's not worth... Nathan. Claire leaned forward. Let me be very clear. Without you, Orion Dynamics would have lost the Meridian contract. We would have started layoffs within a month. Within 3 months, we'd be selling assets to pay creditors. Within 6, the company my father built would cease to exist. You prevented that. So yes, $12,000 is absolutely worth it. It's insulting how little it is, actually, but it's what I could authorize without board approval. Nathan looked at the check again. $12,000. He could fix the car. Buy Emma new shoes. Replace the hot water heater. Pay rent 3 months in advance. Buy groceries without calculating every item. It felt like blood money. Payment for stepping back into a life he'd promised Sarah he'd leave behind. The consulting arrangement with Meridian, Nathan said, carefully folding the check and putting it in his pocket. What exactly are they expecting? Claire pulled up something on her laptop. Technical oversight during the integration phase. They're implementing the crown jewel system across 4 facilities. They want you to review the installation protocols, troubleshoot any issues that arise, and basically make sure they don't brick an $80 million investment. That's not a part-time consulting gig. That's a full-time engineering position, which is why I want to offer you exactly that. Claire turned the laptop around, showing him a document. Lead systems engineer, full benefits. Salary commensurate with experience, which, given your background, would put you in the $140,000 to $160,000 range. Flexible hours, work-from-home options when possible, and a clear understanding that your daughter comes first. Nathan stared at the offer letter on the screen. $140,000 to $160,000. He currently made $38,000 a year before taxes. I can't, he said. Can't or won't? Both. Neither. I don't know. Nathan ran his hand through his hair, frustrated at his inability to articulate the tangled mess in his head. 3 years ago, I walked away from this life because it cost me everything. My wife died because I was too busy being brilliant to notice she needed help. I promised myself I'd never let work become more important than Emma. And you think taking this job would break that promise, wouldn't it? Nathan's voice came out sharper than he intended. 6 months from now, I'd be working 70-hour weeks again, missing Emma's school plays, forgetting to show up for parent-teacher conferences, becoming my father, who I swore I'd never turn into. Claire was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something about my father? Nathan nodded. Marcus Cole was the most brilliant engineer I've ever met. He could solve problems nobody else even understood existed. He built this company from nothing, turned it into something that mattered. Claire's voice was steady, but there was pain underneath. And he was a terrible father. Nathan hadn't expected that. He missed my graduations, forgot my birthday more years than he remembered it. When my mother left, he barely noticed because he was in the middle of some critical project deadline. Claire looked out the window at the city beyond. I spent my entire childhood competing with machines for his attention, and I always lost. I'm sorry, Nathan said quietly. Don't be. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because when he died 2 years ago, I inherited this company, and I made myself a promise. That I would never let work consume me the way it consumed him. That I would never sacrifice relationships for the sake of quarterly earnings. How's that working out? Claire laughed, but it was hollow. I'm 30 years old and I haven't been on a date in 11 months. My friends stopped inviting me to things because I always cancel. Last week I slept in my office 3 nights in a row because going home felt like wasting time. She met Nathan's eyes. So to answer your question, not great. Work is consuming me anyway, just slower than it consumed him. Emma made a small noise from her corner. Both adults looked over to find her completely absorbed in her drawing, tongue sticking out in concentration. She looks like you, Claire said. She looks like her mother. Nathan felt the familiar ache in his chest. But yeah, she has my stubborn streak. The thing about being a parent who works, Claire said, turning back to him, is that there's no perfect solution. You can work maintenance jobs and be present but stressed about money. Or you can work engineering jobs and make good money but be stressed about time. Either way, you're stressed. The question is which stress serves Emma better in the long run. I'm not trying to talk you into anything, Claire interrupted. I'm just saying that you're going to feel guilty either way. You might as well feel guilty while being able to afford Emma's college education. Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to explain that it wasn't about money. It was about presence, about being there, about keeping promises to a woman who couldn't hold him accountable anymore because she was dead. But Claire had a point. He'd felt guilty yesterday picking Emma up late from Mrs. Chen's because the maintenance shift had run over. Felt guilty every time he bought the cheaper cereal instead of the kind Emma liked. Felt guilty that her shoes were getting too small and he'd been putting off buying new ones because the car needed brake pads. Guilt was constant. The only variable was what you got in exchange for it. I need to think about it, Nathan said finally. Fair enough. Claire closed her laptop. But I need an answer by Monday. Meridian wants their technical consultant locked in before they finalize the contract. Monday? Right. Nathan stood up. Was there anything else? Claire hesitated, then said, Actually, yes, I owe you an apology. For what? For not stepping in yesterday morning when Richard humiliated you. Claire's composure cracked slightly. I saw the whole thing. I was standing right there, and I said nothing. I let him treat you like you were nobody, because it was easier than confronting my chief engineering director in front of the team. Nathan hadn't expected this either. You had a lot on your mind. That's not an excuse? I pride myself on running a respectful workplace, on treating people with dignity regardless of their position. And when it actually mattered, I failed. Claire's voice was quiet but intense. I'm sorry. You deserved better. For a moment, Nathan didn't know what to say. He'd spent 3 years being invisible, being overlooked, being dismissed by people who never even bothered to learn his name. Having someone, especially someone powerful, acknowledge that it was wrong felt surreal. Thank you, he said finally. That means something. Good, because I meant it. Claire straightened up, back to business. Oh, and Richard's been placed on administrative leave pending a review of his conduct. Turns out he skipped several critical testing protocols to meet the demonstration deadline. That phase offset you caught? He knew about it, or should have known. Either way, he's done. Nathan felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and discomfort. I wasn't trying to get him fired. You didn't get him fired. He got himself fired by being more concerned with looking good than being good. Claire gathered her laptop. The engineering team asked if you'd be willing to do a technical overview next week. Show them the calibration techniques you used. David Park especially won't shut up about how fast you code. Despite everything, Nathan smiled. David's a good kid. He is. And he looks up to you. They all do now. Claire paused at the door. Think about that too. You walked away from engineering 3 years ago, but engineering didn't walk away from you. You're still brilliant at it, still better than anyone else in that building. That's worth something. After she left, Nathan sat in the conference room for a long moment, the check in his pocket feeling heavier than paper should feel. Daddy? Emma appeared at his elbow. Are you going to work with the robots again? Maybe, sweetheart. I think you should. You were happy yesterday, when you were fixing the sad robot. Emma climbed into his lap, a move that was getting awkward as she got bigger but that Nathan would never discourage. You smiled different, like when you look at pictures of Mommy. Nathan's throat tightened. How did I smile different? Like you remembered something good instead of just something sad. Out of the mouths of babes, Nathan thought again. Emma saw everything, understood more than she should at 6 years old. What if working with the robots means I have less time with you? Nathan asked carefully. Emma considered this with the seriousness she gave to all important questions. Mrs. Chen says her son works a lot, but he loves his kids super much. She says loving someone isn't about how much time, it's about making the time matter. Mrs. Chen is very wise. And also, Emma continued, if you work with the robots, maybe we can get a bigger apartment. One where I have my own room, and you don't have to sleep on the couch that makes your back hurt. Nathan laughed despite himself. My back doesn't hurt. You make the old man noise when you stand up. That means your back hurts. Fair point. They left Orion Dynamics at 5:30, Emma chattering about the fancy markers she'd used and how the receptionist had let her have 3 cookies. Nathan drove home on autopilot, his mind churning through Claire's offer, Helena's expectations, the check in his pocket that represented more money than he'd made in 3 months. $140,000 to $160,000. Full benefits. Flexible hours. And the absolute certainty that the work would expand to fill every available minute, because that's what engineering work did. It was infinite. There was always another problem to solve, another optimization to implement, another crisis that only you could fix. That's how it had happened before. Small compromises that became big compromises. One late night becoming 3, becoming 5, becoming the norm. Sarah had been patient at first, understanding because she knew he loved his work. But patience had an expiration date, and Nathan had blown past it without noticing until it was too late. He pulled into their apartment complex and saw Mrs. Chen watering her tomato plants on the ground floor patio. "Mr. Cole!" She waved him over. "How is my favorite engineer?" "Not an engineer anymore, Mrs. Chen. Just a maintenance guy." "Psh!" She waved dismissively. "A man does not stop being what he is because he changes his job. You are engineer in here." She tapped her temple. "Cannot change that." Emma ran ahead to look at the tomato plants, giving Nathan and Mrs. Chen a moment alone. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said. "Of course. Your son, the one who works in finance. Does he ever feel guilty about the hours he works?" Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Every day. He calls me crying sometimes, says he missed his daughter's soccer game, feels like terrible father." She pinched off a dead leaf from one of the plants. "But you know what I tell him? I tell him his daughter has food, has home, has college fund, has father who works hard to give her opportunities. Sometimes being good parent means choosing which guilt you can live with." There it was again. The same logic Claire had used, the same truth Nathan didn't want to acknowledge. "What if I make the wrong choice?" Nathan asked quietly. "Then you make different choice tomorrow." Mrs. Chen said it with the casual wisdom of someone who'd lived long enough to know that very few choices were permanent. Life is not one big decision. It's 1,000 small decisions every day, and you adjust as you go. That night, after Emma was asleep, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with the check in front of him. $12,000. Not even close to enough, Claire had said, and she was right. Nathan had saved a company, saved dozens of jobs, prevented a catastrophe that would have rippled through hundreds of lives. And he'd done it in less time than it took to watch a movie. That was the thing about expertise. It looked easy when you had it. People forgot the years of learning, the failures, the hard-won knowledge that made the impossible seem simple. They just saw someone solve a problem quickly and thought it must not have been that hard. But Nathan knew better. He knew exactly how rare his skill set was, knew that there were maybe a dozen people in the country who could have diagnosed that encoder problem as quickly as he had, knew that Orion Dynamics had gotten very, very lucky that he'd been in the building at all. The question was, what did he do with that knowledge? He pulled out his laptop, opened a browser, and searched for the apartment complex he'd bookmarked months ago. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, washer and dryer in unit, $2,400 a month, which had been impossible on his maintenance salary but would be comfortable on $140,000. Emma could have her own room. Nathan could sleep in an actual bed. They could have space, comfort, stability. He opened another tab and searched for Emma's school district ratings. Their current apartment was in a 3-star district. The place he was looking at? 8 stars. Better teachers, better resources, better outcomes. Another tab, average cost of college in 2032 when Emma would graduate high school. The number made him wince. Even accounting for inflation and scholarships, he'd need to start saving aggressively if he wanted to give her options. Nathan closed the laptop and pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. Sarah wouldn't want this. She'd want him to choose presence over money, quality time over quality schools. She'd remind him that Emma needed a father who was there, not a father who was wealthy but absent. But Sarah was dead. And Nathan was the only parent Emma had. And that meant making the hard calls alone, with nobody to check his logic or call him out when he was justifying a bad decision. His phone buzzed, a text from David Park. "Hey, Mr. Cole, I know you're probably busy, but the team wants to buy you a beer tomorrow night. Celebrate the Meridian contract. You in?" Nathan stared at the message. When was the last time someone had invited him for drinks? When was the last time he'd had colleagues instead of just coworkers? When was the last time he'd felt part of something bigger than just surviving until the next paycheck? He typed back, "Can't tomorrow. Have Emma. But thanks." The response came immediately. "Bring her. We're going to Marco's Pizza. They have arcade games. Emma would love it." Nathan smiled despite himself. David was trying, really trying to make Nathan feel welcome, feel valued, feel like he belonged. He wrote back, "Maybe. I'll think about it." "Cool. Offer stands either way. You're kind of a legend now, you know. The guy who saved everything. Legend." Nathan almost laughed. He wasn't a legend. He was just a tired single father trying to figure out if he could afford to be good at something again. He got up and checked on Emma. She was sprawled across her bed, covers kicked off, Mr. Beeps clutched in one hand. The robot's broken arm dangled at an angle. Nathan carefully extracted it from her grip, carried it to the kitchen, and finally, sat down to fix it. The problem was simple: a stripped gear in the shoulder joint. Nathan had the parts in his tool bag, had been carrying them for 2 days, meaning to do this repair. He worked quietly, his hands steady, using the precision that came from years of working with delicate components. 15 minutes later, Mr. Beep's arm rotated smoothly again. Nathan tested it 3 times, making sure the repair would hold up to Emma's enthusiastic play style. Fixed. Simple as that. If only everything else was this easy to repair. Nathan placed the robot on Emma's nightstand where she'd see it first thing in the morning, then returned to the kitchen. He pulled out the check again, the job offer email Claire had sent while they were driving home, and his own tangled thoughts about what came next. Monday. He had until Monday to decide. He thought about Emma's 2 small shoes, the water stain on the ceiling, the car's check engine light, the college fund that didn't exist, the opportunities he couldn't provide on $38,000 a year. He thought about Sarah's last words to him, spoken in the hospital before the surgery she wouldn't survive. "Take care of our girl. Whatever it takes, promise me. Whatever it takes." Nathan opened his email and started typing a response to Claire Bennett. His hands shook slightly as he wrote, and he had to delete and restart 3 times before he got the tone right. Professional, clear, setting boundaries but accepting the offer. Whatever it takes. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then immediately wanted to unsend it. But the email was gone, winging its way through the internet to Claire's inbox, carrying his decision into a future he couldn't quite see but had just committed to anyway. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Claire must sleep with her email open. "Excellent. Welcome back to Orion Dynamics. Your start date is Monday, 9 a.m. We'll handle the HR paperwork first thing. And Nathan, you made the right choice." Nathan stared at the message. The right choice. How did anyone ever know if they'd made the right choice? Life didn't come with answer keys or diagnostic readouts. You just made your best guess and hoped the consequences were survivable. He walked to Emma's room one more time, watching her sleep peacefully with her newly repaired robot within reach. She looked so small, so vulnerable, so completely dependent on him to make decisions that would shape her entire life. "I hope I'm doing this right, sweetheart," Nathan whispered. "I really hope I'm not screwing this up." Emma didn't answer, just made a small, snuffling noise and rolled over, taking her stuffed elephant with her. Nathan went back to the pull-out couch, lay down, and stared at the water-stained ceiling until his eyes adjusted to the dark and the giraffe-shaped stain looked more like a dragon. Monday morning, everything would change. He'd stop being invisible, stop being safe, Stop being the quiet maintenance guy nobody noticed. He'd become Nathan Cole again. For better or worse. Whatever it takes, he thought, and finally closed his eyes. Monday morning arrived like a verdict Nathan wasn't sure he was ready to hear. He woke at 5:30 to find Emma already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed with Mr. Beeps, making the robot dance with its newly fixed arm. "You fixed him!" She launched herself at Nathan the moment she saw him in the doorway. "I knew you would. I told Mr. Beeps you'd fix him, and you did." "I told you I would, didn't I?" "Yeah, but you've been saying that for 2 days." Emma said it without accusation, just stating facts. "I was starting to think maybe it was too broken." Nathan felt that observation land somewhere uncomfortable in his chest. 2 days. He'd been carrying the parts to fix a simple stripped gear for 2 days, putting it off because he was too tired, too distracted, too overwhelmed by decisions that felt impossibly large. "Nothing's too broken to fix," Nathan said, hoping that was true. "You just need the right tools and enough time." "And to not be scared," Emma added. "What makes you think I was scared?" Emma gave him the look that 6-year-olds give adults when they're being deliberately obtuse. "You make the thinky face when you're scared, like when we have to go to the dentist or when bills come in the mail. You had the thinky face about Mr. Beeps." Nathan had no defense against that level of perception. "You're too smart for your own good. You know that. Mommy used to say the same thing about you." She did. Sarah had said exactly that, usually right after Nathan had overthought some simple decision into a complicated mess of scenarios and contingencies. They went through their morning routine, but everything felt different now. This wasn't preparing for another maintenance shift. This was preparing for Nathan's first day back at Orion Dynamics as an actual engineer. He'd pulled out the one decent shirt he owned, a blue button-down that was slightly wrinkled because he'd forgotten to iron it. His khakis were clean, but showing their age. "You look nice, Daddy," Emma said through a mouthful of cereal. "I look like I'm trying too hard." That's what looking nice means. Mrs. Chen had agreed to take Emma to school and pick her up, a routine they'd established months ago. But standing in the apartment at 7:45 a.m., watching Emma pack her backpack, Nathan felt the same twist of anxiety he always felt at drop-off time. What if something happened? What if Emma needed him and he was in a meeting he couldn't leave? "Daddy, you're doing the thinky face again," Emma observed. "Sorry, just making sure you have everything. I'm 6, not 2. I know how to pack my backpack." She said it with the exasperated patience of someone who'd had this conversation before. "You're nervous about your first day." "I'm not nervous." "You're doing the thing where you check your pockets a lot. That's your nervous thing." Nathan forced his hands to his sides. When had he become so transparent? Or when had Emma become so good at reading him? "Okay, maybe a little nervous," he admitted. Emma walked over and took his hand. Hers was sticky from cereal milk, but Nathan didn't care. "It's okay to be nervous. Ms. Peterson says being nervous means you care about doing good." "Ms. Peterson is very wise." "She is. She also says you should always go to the bathroom before a long car ride, so I'm going to do that." Emma skipped off to the bathroom, leaving Nathan standing in their small kitchen, trying to remember the last time he'd felt this off balance. Maybe his first day at Orion Dynamics 5 years ago, fresh out of grad school, terrified he'd disappoint Marcus Cole. He'd been 27 then, brilliant but unsure, carrying the weight of student loans and imposter syndrome in equal measure. Now he was 32, less brilliant maybe, but more certain, carrying the weight of single parenthood and a decision he'd made in the middle of the night that he still wasn't sure was right. His phone buzzed. David Park. "First day back. We set up your office on Friday. It's not huge, but it has a window. See you at 9? Office." Nathan had forgotten that lead engineers got offices. For 3 years, he'd worked out of a tool bag in whatever corner he could find. The idea of having a dedicated space felt surreal. He texted back, "See you at 9. The drive to Orion Dynamics took 23 minutes in Monday morning traffic. Nathan dropped Emma at Mrs. Chen's apartment, received a hug that lasted longer than usual, and watched his daughter walk inside, chattering about the purple elephant from her dream. Then he sat in his car for 5 minutes, staring at the Orion Dynamics building, trying to convince himself to go inside. This was stupid. He'd worked here before. He knew the building, knew the people, knew the work. There was no reason to feel like he was about to walk into an ambush, except that everyone knew now. Knew he'd been working maintenance, knew he'd walked away from engineering, knew his wife had died and he'd spent 3 years being invisible. The maintenance uniform had been protective camouflage. The button-down shirt felt like showing up naked. Nathan's phone buzzed again. Claire this time. Running late is fine. HR is flexible. But if you're sitting in the parking garage having a crisis, remember that I'm paying you $155,000 a year, and I'd really like you to actually show up. He almost laughed. $155,000. They'd settled on the high end of the range. That number still didn't feel real. Nathan got out of the car. The security guard greeted him by name. Morning, Mr. Cole. Ms. Bennett said to send you straight up to HR when you arrived. Thanks. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. Nathan checked his reflection in the polished metal doors. Rumpled shirt, tired eyes. The look of a man who'd slept badly and woken up to responsibilities he wasn't certain he could handle. Perfect. HR was on the 4th floor, a maze of cubicles and glass-walled offices that smelled like new carpet and corporate optimism. A woman in her 50s with glasses on a beaded chain greeted him. Nathan Cole? I'm Margaret. We'll get you processed and on the payroll. Should take about an hour if you've got all your documents. An hour of paperwork, tax forms, direct deposit information, emergency contacts, benefits enrollment. Nathan filled it all out mechanically, his pen moving across paper while his mind churned through everything that came after this. The Meridian integration. The technical oversight Helena Cortez expected. The team of engineers who now saw him as some kind of savior instead of the maintenance guy. Emergency contact? Margaret asked, reviewing his forms. Nathan had written Mrs. Chen's name and number. It felt inadequate. She was his neighbor, not family. But there wasn't anyone else. Sarah's parents had moved to Florida after she died, seeking warm weather and distance from the grief. His own parents were dead. He had a sister in Oregon he talked to maybe twice a year. That's fine, he said. And for Emma's school pickup, if you're unreachable? Mrs. Chen as well. She's on the approved list at the school. Margaret made a note. Ms. Bennett mentioned you might need flexibility for parenting responsibilities. We've set up your schedule with core hours from 10 to 3, but outside that you can flex as needed. As long as the work gets done, we don't micromanage. 10 to 3. That meant Nathan could drop Emma at school and pick her up most days. Could be there for the small moments that disappeared if you didn't protect them. That works, Nathan said. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Ms. Bennett. She fought the executive team hard on flexible arrangements. Said if we wanted to keep talented people, we needed to treat them like humans. Margaret smiled. She's good people. Doesn't always show it through the CEO mask, but she cares. Nathan thought about Claire's confession in the conference room. About being 30 and working herself into the ground, sleeping in her office, sacrificing everything the way her father had. Maybe fighting for Nathan's flexibility was also fighting for the kind of company she wished had existed for her. By 10:47 a.m., Nathan was officially employed. He had a badge with his name and photo, a benefits package that included health insurance Emma desperately needed, and a direct deposit form that would put more money in his account every 2 weeks than he used to make in 2 months. David Park was waiting outside HR, practically bouncing with excitement. Dude, you're here! Come on, I'll show you your office. Nathan followed David through the engineering floor. People looked up as they passed, some offering nods of recognition, others just staring. Word had spread. The maintenance guy who saved the company was back, and everyone wanted to see if the legend matched reality. Ignore them, David said quietly. They'll get used to you being here again. The office was small, maybe 10 by 12, with a window overlooking the parking lot and a desk that had seen better decades. But it was private, quiet, and had a door Nathan could close. After 3 years of working in public spaces, constantly visible and constantly interrupted, the privacy felt like luxury. It's not much, David said apologetically, but it's yours. We set up your computer over the weekend. Login is your employee ID, password you'll create on first access. It's perfect, Nathan said, and meant it. Cool. So, Claire wants to see you when you're settled. And the engineering team is doing a welcome back thing at lunch. Nothing fancy, just pizza in the break room. You don't have to come if you don't want to, but I'll be there, Nathan said. David's face brightened. Awesome. Okay, I'll let you get settled. After David left, Nathan stood in his new office, trying to absorb the reality of it. His desk, his computer, his window. His career, resurrected from the grave he'd buried it in 3 years ago. He sat down at the computer and logged in. The desktop loaded with the Orion Dynamics wallpaper, a clean interface waiting for him to fill it with work. Nathan opened the email client and found 127 unread messages. Most were welcome back notes from engineers he'd worked with before. A few were technical questions about the crown jewel system. Several were from Helena Cortez's team at Meridian, already CCing him on integration planning discussions. 127 emails on his first day. Nathan felt the familiar weight of expectation settling onto his shoulders. He was about to start reading when someone knocked on his door. Claire stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering one. "Thanks." Nathan took it. The coffee was black, the way he'd always drunk it when he worked here before. She'd remembered. "How's the first morning treating you?" Claire asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Ask me again in 6 months when I know if I made the right choice." "Fair." Claire sipped her own coffee. "I won't keep you long. I know you're drowning in emails already, but I wanted to say that I'm glad you're here. And I know this is complicated for you. I know you walked away for good reasons. So if at any point this becomes too much, if the work-life balance tips too far in the wrong direction, I want you to tell me, immediately, not 6 months from now when you're burned out and resentful." Nathan studied her face. She meant it. This wasn't corporate lip service about work-life balance. This was someone who'd watched her father destroy himself with overwork and was genuinely trying to prevent history from repeating. "I appreciate that," Nathan said, "and I'll hold you to it." "Please do." Claire straightened up. "Okay, actual work stuff. Meridian wants a kickoff call Wednesday at 2. They're bringing their facilities team, their engineering lead, and their CEO. This is them taking your temperature, making sure you're actually as good as I told them you are. No pressure then. You saved an $80 million contract in 15 minutes. A conference call should be easy." Claire smiled slightly. "Also, I need you to review the integration timeline they sent over. It's aggressive, maybe too aggressive. I need someone with actual expertise to tell me if they're being ambitious or delusional." "I'll look at it today." "Thanks." "And Nathan?" Claire paused at the door. "Welcome back, for real this time." After she left, Nathan pulled up the Meridian integration timeline. Helena's team wanted the crown jewel system deployed across 4 facilities in 6 months. Each facility required custom calibration, staff training, and extensive testing before going live. 6 months for 4 facilities. That was actually not insane. Tight, yes. Aggressive, definitely. But doable if the team was competent and nothing went catastrophically wrong. Which meant it would probably take 9 months, because something always went catastrophically wrong. Nathan made notes in the margins of the timeline document, flagging the places where he saw potential bottlenecks. Then he started drafting his assessment for Claire, trying to be honest without being discouraging. He worked through lunch without noticing, lost in the familiar rhythm of technical analysis. The work was engaging in a way maintenance had never been. It required his full brain, challenged him, made him feel like his expertise actually mattered. This was what he'd missed, not the prestige or the salary, but the intellectual engagement. The satisfaction of solving problems that actually required solving. "Mr. Cole?" A knock at his door. David again, looking slightly apologetic. "You missed the pizza thing. We saved you some slices, though, if you're hungry." Nathan checked the time. 2:47 p.m. He'd worked through lunch completely by accident, exactly the behavior he'd promised himself he'd avoid. "Sorry, I got caught up in the Meridian timeline review." "Yeah, that happens here." David set a plate with 3 slices of pizza on Nathan's desk. "The work kind of eats you if you're not careful. I've accidentally pulled all-nighters before. Not because anyone made me, just because I looked up and it was 4 a.m. and I'd been debugging for 8 hours straight." "That's not healthy," Nathan said. "I know. My girlfriend yells at me about it." David shrugged. "But it's also kind of what makes this place special. Like, people here actually care about the work. It's not just a paycheck. It's problems that matter, solutions that make a difference." Nathan took a bite of pizza. It was cold, but still good. And when the work that matters starts mattering more than the people in your life, what then? David was quiet for a moment. I guess that's the line, right? The thing you have to watch for. Yeah, Nathan said. That's the line. The afternoon crawled forward. Nathan finished his timeline assessment, sent it to Claire, and started reviewing the technical specifications for the first Meridian facility. His phone buzzed periodically with texts from Mrs. Chen documenting Emma's day. Picked up from school fine, doing homework now. She wants to know if you're coming home for dinner. Nathan checked the time. 4:15 p.m. He could leave now, be home by 5, have dinner with Emma and actually be present for the evening routine. Or he could stay another hour, finish the specifications review, get ahead of Wednesday's call with Meridian. 10 to 3, Margaret had said, core hours. Outside that, he could flex as needed. Nathan saved his work, shut down his computer, and grabbed his jacket. Emma was more important than getting ahead. He made it home by 5:10, walking into the apartment to find Emma and Mrs. Chen playing Go Fish at the kitchen table. Daddy? Emma abandoned her cards and ran to him. How was your first day at the robot place? Long, Nathan said honestly. But good. How was school? We learned about fractions. I don't get why you'd cut a pizza into eighths instead of just giving everyone a whole pizza. Because sometimes there aren't enough pizzas for everyone to have a whole one. Emma considered this. Then you should make more pizzas. That's actually not bad economic policy, Mrs. Chen said, collecting her cards. I'll leave you two to dinner. Emma, remember to tell your father about the field trip. After Mrs. Chen left, Emma retrieved a crumpled permission slip from her backpack. We're going to the Science Museum next Friday. You have to come. Ms. Peterson says parents can volunteer, and I told her you would because you're smart about science stuff. Nathan looked at the permission slip. Next Friday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., right in the middle of his core hours. His first week back at work, and already there was a conflict. I'll have to check my schedule, Nathan said carefully. Emma's face fell. You always used to check your schedule. Before, when Mommy was here. And then you'd say you had meetings and couldn't come. Nathan felt that land like a punch. He had done that, had missed field trips and school events and parent volunteer days because work was always more important. Because there was always a meeting, always a deadline, always something that couldn't wait. I'll be there, Nathan said. I promise. Really? Really. I'll clear my schedule. Emma's face brightened immediately. She'd already forgiven him for hesitating, already moved past the moment of disappointment. 6-year-olds were resilient like that. But Nathan knew he'd have to tell Claire he needed Friday off. His first week back, and he was already asking for exceptions. Great start. They made dinner together, spaghetti with sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer. Simple food, but Emma chattered through the whole meal about fractions and field trips, and how her friend Madison had lost a tooth at recess. Normal. Mundane. The small moments that used to feel like distractions from important work, but now felt like the only things that actually mattered. After dinner, Nathan helped Emma with her homework, read her 2 chapters of the book they were working through, and tucked her into bed with Mr. Beeps. I'm glad you're working with the robots again, Emma said sleepily. But I'm gladder you came home for dinner. Me too, sweetheart. Promise you'll keep coming home for dinner, even when the robots need you? Nathan thought about the 127 emails in his inbox, the Meridian call on Wednesday, the integration timeline that was probably too aggressive, the expectations that would only grow heavier as the work ramped up. I promise, he said, and hoped he could keep it. After Emma fell asleep, Nathan returned to the kitchen and opened his laptop. He shouldn't work. He'd promised himself he'd protect evenings, keep them sacred for Emma, but there was that specifications review. And those emails. And the nagging feeling that if he didn't stay on top of everything immediately, it would spiral out of control. Just 1 hour, Nathan told himself. Then he'd stop. 2 hours later, he was still working. He didn't notice the time passing until his phone alarm went off at 10 p.m., the reminder he'd set to actually go to sleep at a reasonable hour. Nathan looked up, disoriented, and realized he'd spent the entire evening after Emma's bedtime reading technical documents and responding to emails. This was how it started. The small compromises. Just one more hour. Just one more email. Just this one thing that can't wait until tomorrow. Nathan closed his laptop with more force than necessary. Wednesday's conference call happened at precisely 2 p.m. Nathan sat in a conference room with Claire, David, and two other senior engineers, while Helena Cortez's face filled the main monitor, along with 6 other Meridian executives. Nathan, Helena said, getting straight to business, we've reviewed your timeline assessment. You flagged Facility 3 as a potential bottleneck. Explain. Nathan pulled up the relevant documents. Facility 3 has legacy equipment that isn't directly compatible with the Crown Jewel system. Your timeline assumes we can do a straight swap, but the calibration process for hybrid systems takes longer. You're budgeting 2 weeks. I'd recommend 4, maybe 5, depending on what we find during the initial integration. One of Helena's engineers spoke up. That puts us behind schedule. It puts you behind an unrealistic schedule, Nathan corrected. Better to plan for 5 weeks and deliver in 4 than plan for 2 and discover at week 3 that you need 6. Helena smiled slightly. You're more direct than I expected. You hired me for expertise, not optimism. If you want someone to tell you everything will be fine, there are cheaper consultants. The other Meridian executives looked slightly shocked. Claire was hiding a smile behind her hand. Helena just nodded. Fair point. What else? They went through the timeline point by point, Nathan identifying risks and proposing mitigations. He was in his element here, the technical discussion flowing naturally. This was what he was good at, seeing the problems before they became catastrophes, planning for contingencies, building systems that actually worked instead of systems that looked good on paper. The call ran 90 minutes. When it ended, Helena looked satisfied. Good work, Nathan. Send me your revised timeline by Friday. We'll adjust our planning accordingly. After the call disconnected, Claire turned to Nathan. That was impressive. You basically told a billionaire CEO that her entire timeline was wrong, and she thanked you for it. The timeline was wrong, Nathan said. She needed to know. Most consultants would have sugarcoated it. Most consultants care more about keeping the client happy than keeping the project functional. David was grinning. Dude, you're kind of a badass. Nathan didn't feel like a badass. He felt like someone who'd just committed to a massive project that would consume his next 6 months. But the work had been engaging, the problems were real, and for 90 minutes he'd felt like his expertise actually mattered. That night he made it home by 5:30. Emma showed him her latest drawing, a robot family with a daddy robot, a kid robot, and a mommy robot with angel wings. Nathan's throat tightened, but he smiled and told her it was beautiful. They had dinner, they did homework, they read 2 more chapters. Nathan tucked Emma in and promised to come home for dinner again tomorrow. Then he opened his laptop, told himself just 1 hour, and worked until midnight revising the Meridian timeline. Thursday repeated Wednesday. Friday repeated Thursday. By the end of his first week, Nathan had developed a routine. Arrive at 10 a.m., work core hours, leave by 5 p.m., have dinner with Emma, work from 8 p.m. to midnight after she went to sleep. He was keeping his promises. Technically. He was home for dinner, he was present for bedtime. He was making the field trip next Friday. But he was also sleeping 5 hours a night and mainlining coffee during the day. The work was expanding to fill every available moment, exactly as he'd feared. On Friday afternoon, Nathan sat in his office reviewing the final Meridian timeline when Claire appeared in his doorway. You look terrible, she said without preamble. Thanks. That's the confidence boost I needed. I'm serious. You've been here a week, and you already have the 1,000-yard stare. Claire came in and closed the door. Talk to me. What's going on? Nathan wanted to say everything was fine, wanted to prove he could handle this, that taking the job had been the right choice, that he wasn't the same person who'd burned out 3 years ago. But Claire had asked him to be honest, had specifically said to tell her if things got to be too much. I'm working every night after Emma goes to bed, Nathan admitted, just trying to stay on top of everything. The Meridian integration, the team questions, the technical reviews. It's a lot. How much sleep are you getting? Enough? That's not an answer. 5 hours. Maybe 6 on good nights. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Nathan, that's not sustainable. I know, but I'm trying to prove I can do this. That hiring me wasn't a mistake. Hiring you wasn't a mistake. You're brilliant, but brilliance doesn't matter if you burn out in 2 months. Claire sat down across from him. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop working after 7 p.m. Hard stop. No emails, no documents, no just one more thing. Claire, I'm not asking, I'm telling, as your boss. 7 p.m., you close the laptop and you don't open it again until 10 a.m. the next morning. Claire's voice was firm. And before you argue, remember that I specifically hired you with the understanding that Emma comes first. If you're working until midnight every night, Emma's not coming first. You're just sacrificing sleep instead of sacrificing time with her, which is still sacrificing yourself. Nathan didn't have a good counter-argument to that.
Fine, he said. 7 p.m. cutoff. I'm going to check. I can see when you send emails. If I see anything time-stamped after 7, I'm calling you personally to yell at you. Despite everything, Nathan smiled. You're a very intense CEO. I learned from the best. My father taught me that companies are built on people, and people break if you push them too hard. Claire stood up. Go home. It's 4:30 on a Friday. Spend the evening with Emma. The work will still be here Monday.
Nathan saved his work, shut down his computer, and left. Emma was thrilled when he picked her up early from Mrs. Chen's. Can we go to the park? She asked. They went to the park. Nathan pushed Emma on the swings until his arms ached, built sand castles in the sandbox until his knees protested, and chased her around the playground until he was legitimately winded. Normal dad stuff. The kind of stuff he'd missed while working himself into the ground years ago. They got ice cream on the way home. Chocolate chip for Emma, vanilla for Nathan. They ate dinner on the apartment's small balcony, watching the sunset turn the sky pink and orange. This was a good day, Emma said, chocolate ice cream smeared on her face. Yeah, Nathan agreed. It really was. That night, at 7 p.m., Nathan's laptop stayed closed. He watched a movie with Emma, gave her a bath, read her 3 chapters instead of 2 because she asked nicely. At 8 p.m., after Emma was asleep, Nathan looked at his closed laptop. The work was there, waiting. The emails were piling up. The integration timeline needed another review. But Claire was right. The work would still be there Monday. Nathan left the laptop closed, picked up a book he'd been meaning to read for 6 months, and actually relaxed for the first time in a week. He was asleep by 10 p.m. 8 hours of sleep, a luxury he'd forgotten existed. Monday morning, Nathan felt almost human again. The field trip permission slip was signed and submitted. The Meridian timeline was solid. His inbox was manageable. Maybe, just maybe, he could actually do this. Balance the work with Emma. Be present without sacrificing competence. Find the line between engagement and obsession. It wouldn't be easy. But nothing worth doing ever was. The Science Museum field trip happened on a Friday morning that started with Emma spilling orange juice on Nathan's only clean dress shirt. He changed into a polo that was slightly too tight around the shoulders, decided it would have to do, and drove Emma to school where 23 first graders were already vibrating with barely contained excitement. Mr. Cole, Ms. Peterson greeted him with the weary enthusiasm of someone who'd been teaching 6-year-olds for 15 years. So glad you could make it. We have you assigned to Emma's group along with 3 other students. Nathan found himself responsible for Emma, plus a boy named Tyler who had already tried to eat a crayon, a girl named Jasmine who wouldn't stop asking if they'd see dinosaurs, and a quiet kid named Marcus who seemed primarily interested in his shoelaces. The bus ride took 40 minutes. Nathan spent it preventing Tyler from opening the emergency exit, explaining to Jasmine that the Science Museum had fossils, not living dinosaurs, and making sure Marcus didn't tie his shoelaces together. Is this what you do all day? Asked another parent volunteer, a woman named Sandra, whose daughter was friends with Emma. No, usually I debug automated manufacturing systems, Nathan said, then had to grab Tyler before he climbed over the seat. That sounds way easier than this. She wasn't wrong. The museum was chaos. 23 first graders unleashed into exhibits about physics, biology, and astronomy. Nathan's group made it through exactly one exhibit, the one about simple machines, before Emma tugged his sleeve. Daddy, I need to tell you something important. What's up, sweetheart? Emma pulled him aside, away from the other kids. Her face had that serious expression she got when something was really bothering her. Madison's dad isn't here. Again. He promised he'd come, but he had to work. She's really sad about it. Emma looked up at Nathan with those 2 perceptive eyes. You always used to have to work too. Before Mommy died, before you became a maintenance guy. Nathan knelt down to her level, aware of the other kids exploring the lever and pulley display nearby. Yeah, he said honestly, I did. I missed a lot of stuff because I thought work was more important. But you came today. I did. Even though you have the robot job again? The important one? Nathan understood what she was really asking. Was this a temporary thing? Would he slide back into the pattern of broken promises and last-minute cancellations? Would work consume him again the way it had before? Emma, I can't promise I'll make every field trip. Sometimes work really will be too important to miss. But I can promise that you'll always be more important than work. That when I have to choose, I'll choose you. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I learned that lesson the hard way. I'm not going to forget it. Emma studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Can we go see the planetarium now? Marcus said there's a show about black holes. They spent 3 hours at the museum. Nathan's feet hurt. Tyler had eaten something he shouldn't have and thrown up in the bathroom. Jasmine had cried when she realized there really weren't any living dinosaurs. And Marcus had somehow lost both his shoes. It was exhausting and chaotic, and Nathan wouldn't have traded it for anything. On the bus ride back, Emma fell asleep against his shoulder, museum gift shop dinosaur clutched in one hand. Nathan looked at her peaceful face and felt something settle in his chest. A certainty that he'd made the right choice coming today, even though he'd had to reschedule 2 meetings and push back a deadline review. The work would survive. It always did. But these moments with Emma, these were finite, limited. She'd only be 6 once, only have this particular field trip once, only fall asleep on his shoulder trusting him completely for a few more years before adolescence made everything complicated. Nathan's phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Helena called. Facility 1 just went live ahead of schedule. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Nathan smiled and pocketed the phone. The work was going well. Emma was happy. Maybe he was actually figuring out how to balance this. The following Wednesday, Nathan was deep in a code review when David knocked on his office door. Hey, got a minute? There's something weird happening with the calibration logs from Facility 2. Nathan pulled up the data David sent over. At first glance, everything looked normal. But there, a tiny fluctuation in the encoder timing. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to make Nathan's instincts prickle. This looks familiar, Nathan said slowly. That's what I thought. It's like a smaller version of the phase offset from the original crown jewel problem. Nathan ran the numbers through his diagnostic algorithm. The offset was minor now, but it was building. Left unchecked, it would cascade into a full system failure in approximately 6 weeks. We need to recalibrate before they go live, Nathan said. That's going to delay their timeline. Better delayed than catastrophic. Nathan was already drafting an email to Helena's team. Good catch, David. Most people would have missed this. David flushed slightly. I learned from watching you, the way you listen to systems, look for patterns. It's not just about the numbers on the screen. Marcus Cole taught me that. Said the best engineers trust their instincts as much as their instruments. I wish I could have worked with him. Everyone says he was brilliant. He was. He was also a workaholic who destroyed his relationship with his daughter and died having regrets he couldn't fix. Nathan looked at David seriously. Don't be like him. Don't be like I was 5 years ago. The work matters, but it's not the only thing that matters. David was quiet for a moment. My girlfriend said something similar last week. Said she feels like she's competing with my job for my attention. What did you tell her? That she was being dramatic, that I'm just really passionate about the work. David shrugged uncomfortably. But maybe she has a point? She definitely has a point. Nathan saved the diagnostic report. I spent 3 years learning this lesson the hard way. Don't wait until you lose someone to figure out what actually matters. After David left, Nathan sat in his office thinking about Marcus Cole, the man who'd mentored him, challenged him, pushed him to be better. The same man whose daughter had inherited a company and a legacy of regret. Marcus had died of a heart attack at his desk, working late on a project that probably could have waited until morning. Claire had been the one to find him. Nathan hadn't known that until she'd mentioned it in passing during a meeting. She'd said it casually, like it was just a fact, but Nathan had seen the pain underneath. He pulled out his phone and texted Emma a picture of the drawing she'd made that morning, a robot with a flower. Just checking in. Hope school is good today. Love you. Emma texted back immediately. Love you too, Daddy. Mrs. Chen is making cookies. Can I have two?
Nathan smiled. Yes, but save one for me. 3 cookie emojis appeared in response. Small moments, small connections. The things that mattered more than code reviews and calibration logs. 2 months into the Meridian integration, Facility 2 went live. Then Facility 3. Then Facility 4. Each deployment was smoother than the last, the team learning from each iteration. Helena sent Nathan a bonus check with a note. You underpromised and overdelivered. Rare quality. Thank you.
The bonus was enough to cover the deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in the Better School District. Nathan signed the lease on a Saturday afternoon while Emma ran through the empty rooms, her voice echoing off the walls. My own room, Daddy. I get my own room. You do? And I get an actual bed instead of a pull-out couch. Does your back still hurt? Not as much anymore. They moved 2 weeks later. Mrs. Chen helped, bringing homemade dumplings and unsolicited advice about furniture placement. David and a few other engineers from Orion showed up with a truck and muscles, making the whole process take half as long as Nathan had feared.
The new apartment had space, light, a kitchen where Nathan could actually cook instead of just heating things up. Emma's room had a window that looked out over a small park. Nathan's room had a closet that fit all his clothes with room to spare. It felt like progress, like things were actually working out. But success had a way of breeding new complications.
In month 4 of the integration, Helena called with a new proposal. Meridian wanted to expand the Crown Jewel deployment to 8 additional facilities. They wanted Nathan to lead the entire project. Full-time engagement, significant increase in compensation, guaranteed contract for 2 years. This is a career-defining opportunity, Helena said on the call. The kind of project that establishes you as the expert in this field. People will be calling you for years based on this work. Nathan listened to the offer, did the mental math on the compensation, and felt the familiar pull of ambition warring with the promises he'd made to himself. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, take a week. But Nathan, opportunities like this don't come along often. After the call ended, Nathan sat in his office staring at nothing. 8 additional facilities. That was at least another 18 months of intensive work. Late nights, constant travel, the kind of all-consuming project that left no room for anything else. It was also the kind of opportunity that could set up Emma's entire future. College fully funded. Financial security. The ability to give her opportunities Nathan had never had. He called Claire into his office and explained the situation.
What do you want to do? She asked.
I don't know. Part of me wants to jump at it. It's the biggest project I've ever been offered. The compensation alone would change everything for Emma and me. And the other part? The other part remembers why I walked away from engineering in the first place. Remembers what it cost me last time I let work become everything. Nathan rubbed his eyes tiredly. I promised Emma I'd choose her. I promised myself I wouldn't become my father. And this project, there's no way to do it without sacrificing the balance I've been trying to build. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Can I tell you what I think my father would say?
Yeah. He'd tell you to take it. That opportunities like this define careers. That Emma would understand when she's older that providing for her future is more important than being at every school event. Claire looked out the window. And he'd be wrong. Nathan hadn't expected that.
My father built an empire, Claire continued softly. But he lost his family doing it. My mother left. I grew up barely knowing him. And in the end, when he was dying in that hospital bed, you know what he talked about? Not the patents, not the contracts, not the company. He talked about all the moments he missed. My first dance recital, my high school graduation, the conversation we never had about my dreams because he was always too busy with his own. Claire, I'm not saying don't take the Meridian offer. I'm saying that you need to decide what success actually looks like for you. Is it money, recognition, career advancement, or is it Emma knowing her father was there when she needed him? Because you can't have both. Not at the level Helena is talking about. You'll have to choose. After Claire left, Nathan pulled out his phone and looked at his photos. Hundreds of pictures of Emma. At the park, at the museum, doing homework at the kitchen table, sleeping with Mr. Beeps, every moment captured because he'd been there to capture it. Then he scrolled further back, to the photos from before Sarah died. Family pictures where Nathan was barely in frame because he'd always been at work. Events he'd missed because of deadlines. Emma's first birthday where Nathan had shown up 2 hours late with a work emergency still blowing up his phone. He'd had his chance at being the guy who chose work. He knew how that story ended. Nathan called Helena back that afternoon. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but I have to decline. I can consult on the first 2 facilities of the expansion, help get your team trained up on the protocols. But I can't lead the full project. I have other commitments that take priority." Helena was silent for a moment. "I respect that. And I'm disappointed, but I respect it. Let me ask you something. Would you be willing to train our internal team, not lead the project, just provide expertise as needed, flexible schedule? That I can do." "Good. I'll have my team draft a modified proposal. Consulting basis, you control your own hours. We pay for expertise when we need it." After they hung up, Nathan felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. He'd turned down a massive opportunity. He'd probably just cost himself 6 figures in compensation. His engineering colleagues would think he was insane, but Emma would have a father who came home for dinner, who made field trips, who prioritized her over everything else. That was worth more than any contract. That evening, Nathan told Emma about turning down the job over dinner. "Does that mean we have to move back to the small apartment?" she asked worriedly. "No, sweetheart. We're staying right here. I'll still be working, just not as much. I'll still be able to take care of you." "Good, because I really like having my own room." Emma took a bite of her pasta. "Madison's dad took that big job. The one he was telling everyone about. She says she never sees him anymore. He's always on planes." "How does Madison feel about that?" Emma shrugged. "She says it's okay because he brings her presents from every city, but she cried at lunch yesterday because he missed her dance recital again." She looked up at Nathan. "I'm glad you said no to the robot job. Presents are nice, but they're not the same as having your dad there." Nathan felt his throat tighten. "No, they're not. Mommy used to say that time was the only thing you can't get more of, that once it's gone forever." Emma said this with the casual wisdom of a child quoting something she'd heard but didn't fully understand yet. "I think she meant you should spend it on people you love instead of just working all the time." Sarah had said that multiple times, usually during arguments about Nathan's schedule, his priorities, his inability to leave work at the office. "Your mommy was very smart," Nathan said. "I know. I wish she was still here." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." 6 months after Nathan had returned to Orion Dynamics, Claire called an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main atrium, engineers and accountants and administrative staff, all wondering what was important enough to pull them from their work. Claire stood on the second-floor balcony, looking down at the assembled crowd. 6 months ago, she said, her voice carrying through the space, this company was on the edge of collapse. We had one chance to save ourselves, the Meridian contract, and we almost lost it because of a problem nobody caught. Nathan stood in the back of the crowd, trying to be invisible again, but people kept glancing his way. What saved us, Claire continued, wasn't our fancy equipment or our impressive credentials. It was someone who was willing to speak up even when nobody wanted to listen. Someone who valued being right over being comfortable. Someone who fixed a problem in 15 minutes that could have destroyed everything we'd built. Nathan wanted to leave. This was too much attention, too much credit for something that had felt natural at the time. Nathan Cole saved this company, Claire said, looking directly at him now. But more importantly, he taught us something about what real expertise looks like. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It just shows up and does the work. The crowd applauded. Nathan stood there feeling awkward and exposed, wishing Claire had just sent an email. But there's something else Nathan taught me, Claire said, quieter now. He taught me that success isn't just about saving companies or landing contracts. It's about knowing what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not. It's about understanding that some things are more important than work. She paused, seemed to gather herself. Which is why I'm announcing a new company-wide policy. Mandatory core hours are being reduced. Flex time is being expanded. Parents get priority scheduling for school events. And we're implementing a hard rule. No emails after 7 p.m. unless it's a genuine emergency. Because I've learned the hard way that burnt-out employees don't build great companies. Present, balanced employees do. The applause was louder this time. Nathan saw David grinning at him from across the atrium. Other engineers were nodding, some looking relieved. My father built Orion Dynamics by sacrificing everything else in his life, Claire said. I almost lost it by trying to do the same thing. We're not doing that anymore. We're building a different kind of company, one where people matter as much as profits, where being a good parent is valued as highly as being a good engineer. After the meeting, Nathan tried to slip away, but Claire caught him in the hallway. You're not subtle, Nathan said. I wasn't trying to be. You deserve the recognition. I was just trying to keep my job when I fixed that calibration issue. You were trying to do the right thing. There's a difference. Claire smiled. Also, the board approved something else. We're creating a new position, Director of Engineering Operations. Oversight role, flexible schedule, focus on training and quality assurance rather than day-to-day crisis management. I want you to take it. Claire, before you say no, hear me out. It's a promotion, but not the kind that consumes your life. You set the schedule. You choose the projects. You build a team that can handle the work when you need to be at Emma's school events. It's designed specifically for someone who's brilliant, but refuses to sacrifice everything for work. Nathan thought about it. Not the knee-jerk no of someone scared of commitment, but actual consideration. Director of Engineering Operations. A role that played to his strengths without demanding he surrender his life. Can I have the weekend to think about it? Of course, but Nathan, I'm not trying to trap you into becoming your father. I'm trying to build the kind of role I wish had existed for him. The kind where being good at your job doesn't require being bad at being human. That weekend, Nathan took Emma to the park. They spent 3 hours there just playing, flying a kite, feeding ducks, building elaborate sand structures that Emma insisted were robot castles. Daddy, Emma said as they were packing up to leave, are you happy? What do you mean? Are you happy? With the robot job and our new apartment and everything? Nathan looked at his daughter. 7 years old now. Her birthday had passed quietly last month with cake and a small party. She'd grown so much in the months since he'd returned to Orion, gotten taller, more confident, more sure of herself. Yeah, Nathan said honestly. I am. Are you? Uh-huh. Because you're here. Like actually here, not just in the apartment, but thinking about work. Emma took his hand. Mommy would be happy too, I think, that you figured out how to be both things. Both things? Smart daddy who fixes robots and regular daddy who comes to field trips. Out of the mouths of babes, Nathan thought for the 1,000th time. Emma had distilled it down to the essential truth. You didn't have to choose between being competent and being present. You just had to fight like hell to be both. On Monday, Nathan accepted Claire's offer. Director of Engineering Operations. A role designed for someone who'd learned that success meant more than a title on a business card. 3 years later, Nathan stood in the audience at Emma's elementary school graduation. She was 10 now, about to start middle school, already showing signs of the brilliant, stubborn person she was becoming. When they called her name, she walked across the stage with confidence, accepted her certificate, and scanned the crowd until she found Nathan. Their eyes met. She smiled. Nathan smiled back, phone out, capturing the moment. Not because he might miss it. He was there, present, fully engaged, but because some moments deserve to be remembered. After the ceremony, Emma ran up to him, certificate waving. Did you see? I got the science award. I saw. I'm so proud of you. Miss Peterson says I'm really good at understanding how things work. Like you. Emma hugged him fiercely. Can we get ice cream? Absolutely. They got ice cream, chocolate chip for Emma, vanilla for Nathan. They sat on a bench outside the shop, watching people walk by, enjoying the early summer weather. Daddy, Emma said around a mouthful of ice cream, when I grow up, I think I want to be an engineer, like you. Nathan felt something swell in his chest. Pride, yes, but also a fierce protective instinct. If you do, I'll support you. But Emma, I want you to remember something. What? Being good at something doesn't mean you have to sacrifice everything else for it. You can be brilliant and still have a life. You can build amazing things and still be there for the people you love. Don't let anyone tell you that success requires giving up everything that matters. Emma nodded seriously. Like how you're good at robots, but you still come to all my school stuff? Exactly like that. Okay, I'll remember. She went back to her ice cream, crisis averted, lesson learned, childhood intact. Nathan looked at his daughter and thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the lowest point of his life,
standing in a hospital corridor learning his wife was gone, to this moment, watching Emma grow into someone remarkable. He thought about the choices he'd made, leaving engineering, coming back to it, turning down opportunities, accepting others. The constant negotiation between ambition and presence, between being good at work and being good at life. There was no perfect balance. Some days he worked too much. Some days he was distracted during Emma's homework time. Some days he missed the deadline or forgot the parent-teacher conference or burnt dinner because he was thinking about calibration algorithms. But the trajectory was right. The priorities were right. Emma was thriving. Nathan was contributing meaningful work without destroying himself. And they had built a life that felt sustainable instead of constantly on the edge of collapse. That evening, back at their apartment, Emma went to her room to play while Nathan started dinner. His phone buzzed with a work email. Someone at Meridian needed consultation on a new facility deployment. Nathan looked at the email, looked at the clock showing 6:47 p.m., and put the phone away. The work could wait until tomorrow. Right now he had a daughter who wanted to tell him about her graduation day, who wanted to show him the science award she'd earned, who needed him to be present, engaged, there. "Emma," he called, "want to help me make dinner? Can we make the pasta with the cheese you do the special way?" Absolutely. They made dinner together, Emma chattering about middle school and whether she'd get a locker, and if the homework would be too hard. Nathan listened, really listened, not just hearing the words but engaging with them, asking questions, being present. After dinner, they watched a movie. Emma fell asleep halfway through, curled up against Nathan's side, just like she had on that field trip bus 3 years ago. Nathan looked down at her peaceful face and felt something settle in his chest, a certainty that he'd made the right choices. Not perfect choices, there was no such thing, but right enough, good enough. Choices that prioritized what actually mattered. The maintenance uniform had been armor. The engineering job was a tool. But being Emma's father, that was the only role that actually defined him. Everything else was just details. Nathan carefully extracted himself from the couch, carried Emma to her room, and tucked her in with Mr. Beeps. The robot had been repaired a dozen times over the years, its original parts slowly replaced until it was more patched than original, but Emma refused to let it go. Some things were worth fixing, no matter how many times they broke. Nathan turned off Emma's light, closed her door halfway, and stood in the hallway of their apartment, their home. The place they'd built together after loss had tried to destroy them. Outside the window, a crescent moon hung in the darkening sky. Nathan remembered the night he'd accepted Claire's job offer, how that same crescent moon had felt like a verdict on a choice he wasn't sure was right. 3 years later, he knew. The choice had been right. Not because everything was perfect, but because he'd learned something essential. Success wasn't about being the smartest person in the room, or saving companies, or making 6 figures. Success was being there when Emma called for him, being present when she needed help with homework, being available when she just wanted to talk about nothing important. Success was choosing people over problems, presence over prestige, love over legacy. His phone buzzed one more time. David, asking about a technical issue that could probably wait until morning. Nathan typed back, "Let's talk about it tomorrow. It's family time right now." David's response came immediately. "Understood. My girlfriend thanks you for the example." Nathan smiled, pocketed his phone, and went to clean up the dinner dishes. Small tasks. Normal tasks. The unglamorous work of building a life that mattered. The Crown Jewel system was running perfectly across 12 facilities now. Orion Dynamics was profitable again. Claire had successfully transformed the company culture into something her father would barely recognize. Healthier, more balanced, built on the radical idea that people mattered. And Nathan Cole, the quiet man nobody had noticed 3 years ago, had learned that being invisible wasn't the same as being insignificant. That expertise meant knowing not just how to solve problems, but which problems were worth solving. That the most important work he'd ever do had nothing to do with engineering and everything to do with being there, present, engaged, for the small human who trusted him completely. Emma would remember this. Not the salary or the title or the contract saved. She'd remember that her father showed up, that when she called, he answered, that she mattered more than anything else in his world. And someday, when Emma was grown and facing her own impossible choices between ambition and presence, maybe she'd remember what her father had taught her.
that you could be brilliant and still be there, that success didn't require sacrifice, that the best legacy wasn't what you built, but who you showed up for. The dishes were done. The apartment was quiet. Emma was sleeping peacefully. Nathan turned off the kitchen light and looked out the window one more time at the crescent moon. Tomorrow he'd go back to Orion Dynamics. He'd solve problems and train engineers and contribute his expertise to projects that mattered. But tonight, he was just Emma's dad, standing in their home, grateful for second chances and hard-won wisdom and the opportunity to get it right this time. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything that actually mattered.